Chapter 58. Eventually Shadow comes to realize that he is not, in fact, paralyzed. That was his first thought when he felt the villain's quirk take hold. It was an easy mistake to make, that he was with his body suspended in invisible concrete, helpless to resist as Overhaul's men surrounded him and took him prisoner. But eventually it occurs to him that he can still move, and his body is still responding to commands from his brain. It's just doing it very, very slowly. His eyelids slide at a snail's pace when he blinks, and when he tries to struggle, he may as well be swimming through actual, liquid concrete. Luckily it seems to affect voluntary actions only. He's still breathing fairly normally, so he's not about to suffocate, and when his hand finally reaches the side of his throat, he finds his pulse rate normal as well. This also answers his most pressing question. The villain holding him prisoner has to be Kurono Harry, one of Overhaul's closest lieutenants. At the moment, Shadow lies in a small chamber molded from the tunnels by Mimic's quirk, immobilized with Kurono and a few henchmen standing guard over him. Kurono took his knife, and someone tied a blindfold over Shadow's eyes to keep him from using his quirk. Someone else kicked him in the ribs and stabbed down hard on his right leg. It's hard to judge the pain when he can hardly move, but they are most likely broken. Luckily, the villain quickly bores of kicking someone incapable of even reacting, much less fighting back, and none of the others pick up where he left off. They are waiting, he realizes. They have to wait. Mimic can only control so much of the tunnels, and the trigger that allows him to do so will only last so long. There's only one exit to their hiding place, and beyond it, their way out is still swarming with heroes. They have to wait for their boss to clear the way for them. Kurono is saying something to him, but Shadow checked out a few minutes ago. It's not anything useful. The young man is simply ranting about his leader's motives. You hear one grandiose speech about destroying the world to build it anew, and you've heard them all. And so, Shadow lies still and waits, because there's literally nothing else he can do besides bide his time until opportunity or rescue arrives. He wonders idly if there are any ghosts in the room with them. He hopes they know not to bother with him. They are far more help to Midoriya than they are to him. Hey. The ghost that speaks to him is one of Overhaul's former followers, the one that called Chooser a turncoat. Chooser herself is nowhere to be seen. Either they tore her apart or she fled. You can help us fight, can't you? You can make it so he sees us and feels us. His eyes glitter eagerly. Do it. Bring us all in and we'll beat him to a pulp for you. The ones in hearing range echo the speaker. Do it. What are you just standing there for? I've waited long enough. I want to make him hurt. Nemodoshin is the first to charge, navigating the treacherous ground before Chisaki has released it from his quirk. He's nimble and quick enough to manage it, and Izuku holds himself balanced and ready because Nemoda's path is heading straight for him. His fingers spark. All around him, the voices of the dead rise and fall. Many of them are still focused on Chooser, but they are there. He could make them solid, real. He could bring out a small army against Nemoda, against Larceny and Overhaul. They want to fight. They've made that much clear ever since Izuku brought them into this. But Chooser is still fresh in his mind. The last he saw of her, she was spitting curses and lashing at the angry dead around her. With Chooser gone, the spectral crowd stirs and Izuku hesitates. The power reaches his fingertips and goes no further. What if she isn't the only one? His hesitation almost costs him. Izuku blinks and Nemodo is close. He can dodge, but is between him and A. Can he grab her first? Does he have time? A grey blur blocks his vision, and Izuku stumbles back as Night Eye meets Nemodo head-on. In the blink of an eye, the masked man is hurtling into the nearest wall. He's a lot less graceful in landing than Izuku remembers Bane. Focus. Night Eye's sharp voice brings him back to the present. They'll try to separate us. Keep hold of her. As soon as there's an opening, you get out. Do you understand? Izuku lifts A onto his back. She settles there, arms locked around his shoulders, and doesn't make a sound. I understand, he says. Overhaul's hands touch down once more, and the ground shreds itself to pieces. Spikes and shrapnel hurtle straight at them. Izuku dodges the worst of it, but feels the sting as tiny shards of concrete hurtle at his face. Eri's arms tighten around him, and he drops her face into his shoulder, which tells him that she got stung, too. Sorry, he whispers to her. Are you okay, Eri? mm. It comes out as a whimper. Another barrage of debris flew at them. Hold on. Izuku launched himself into the air, rebounding off the nearest wall to stay clear and slow his descent. Voices reached his ears from all around, ghosts calling out warnings to cover the angles he can't see himself. The geography changes again and again, spikes and valleys and hidden pits, but Izuku manages to keep up with each attack. But that's all he can do, keep up. He can't win like this. He can't even escape, not with Eri on his back. Chisaki closed all the exits. Izuku can't break open a new one without exposing himself and Air to attack. They are still trapped, and with their line of communication gone, they have no way of knowing whether help is coming. Another voice reaches him from the wall. Nemoto is on his feet, his mocking tone ringing out over the voices of the dead. So you're all talk after all, he taunts. How did you cheat my quirk? I told the truth is ripped from Izuku's throat. Believe me, that's a first for me, too. Nemoto shakes his head as if giving up on him and turns his attention on Night Eye instead. Izuku can only spare them a brief glance and trust that Night Eye has it handled. I am getting tired of this, Chisaki says dryly. He's barely moved in the past few minutes. Larceny. Instinctively, Izuku latches onto Air's arms. He isn't sure if larceny's quirk works on living things as well as inanimate objects, but right now Air is the most precious thing he's holding, and if the Yakuzas get their hands on her then all is lost. But larceny doesn't activate his quirk, and Air never leaves his back. Instead, Chisaka rips up the ground yet again, forcing Izuku on the defensive. Spikes and explosions burst from the ground and narrowly miss tearing into his face. It's worse than anything Bakugo has ever thrown at him, worse than Pixie Bob at her most ruthless. It's a hurricane of shrapnel that obscures his vision, forcing him down to base instinct just to stay on his feet and keep from being bludgeoned to death by flying rubble or skewered on the tip of a spike. He can't see Night Eye anymore, can't hear him if the hero tries to call out to him. Even the ghosts feel beyond reach. The only one quick enough to stay close is Ray. With a burst of one for all, he flings himself backward, wincing when shrapnel still grazes him. His ears ring with the tearing of concrete and his own pounding pulse. When he can hear again, the ghosts are screaming at him. Watch out! He raises his head and meets Larceny's crazed smile as he stares down the barrel of a handgun. His immediate thought is to shield Air. The instinct to dodge comes too late. A point on his shoulder stings, and one for all's lightning sputters into sparks. Panic shoots through Izuku, flooding his senses with a choking feeling of dread. Ray is screaming, nearly drowning out the nearest ghosts when they warn him. Quoker raising bullets. His body moves on its own, driven by instinct and desperation. He can almost feel it spreading through his veins, burning up the fire and lightning inside him and leaving him cold and empty. He reaches for one for all's vanishing embers, stokes the fire but it can vanish completely. And pours it all into the nearest ghost he can touch. Ray's black eyes meet his for a split second, blank with shock, before the green lightning fills her. And then Izuku can't feel it anymore. The familiar hum of his inherited quirk, always floating just within reach whenever he needs it, is gone. Numb silence roots him to the spot where he stands. Across the room, Larceny laughs wildly as he turns the gun toward Night Eye. Izuku is watching his face and sees the moment his triumphant smile vanishes. A writhing mass of darkness hits him and keeps going, hurling him across the demolished ground until their momentum finally runs out. Larceny lands flat on his back, and the riddling dark shifts, contorts and settles into the Ray's shape. She's crouching over him, strings of black leading from the tips of her claw-like fingers to Larceny's eyes. Her dark hair twists into living shadows. Inches away from his face, Ray opens her mouth wide enough to split her head in half and screams. Larceny's mouth opens wide, but he doesn't scream. He probably can't. It takes some time before he finally, mercifully falls unconscious. Chisaki lunges, but before he can try to touch Ray, she vanishes. Izuku blinks and finds her standing near him again, green sparks running across her body. The other ghosts are silent, staring at her in shock, but they are there. One for all is gone, but he's still. One for all is gone. It's not gone, a familiar voice says, startling him. It's Magna. Magna from the League of Villains is here, watching the fight instead of following her former comrades. I've been watching, Anne. You just got hit with one of their temporary bullets. Survive this and it'll come back. Eventually. Izuku looks to her, raw with hope. After Chooser, he isn't sure if he can trust another villain ghost so soon. And this is Magna, a member of the League, who has only ever heard him and heard his classmates and teachers. She heard Pixie Bob. She helped kidnap him and Bakuga. She's part of the reason why Ragdoll lost her quirk. The dead villain sneers a little. What's that look for, she asks. I'm no sycophant like that bitch from before. You know damn well where my loyalties lie. He killed me and I want him destroyed, simple as that. She's right, another ghost adds. They only just developed the permanent bullets and with the girl gone they couldn't make more. They won't waste the fuel they have arming and expendable. If anyone's got them it's Chisaki himself. At least Nemoto's down, someone else says. Izuku looks around, trying to pinpoint where he last saw Nemoto, and jumps when Night Eye seems to materialize next to him. There's blood on the hams of his sleeves. Where's Nemoto? Izuku asks. Taken care of, Night Eye replies grimly. Your quirk. It's temporary, Izuku says. I think. Only he hesitates, because Chisaki may still be in earshot. Only the strength is gone. He feels sick to his stomach, admitting that to the man who didn't want him to inherit it in the first place. If Night Eye has anything to say about it, a low growl from Ray stops him short. He looks straight at her, seeing her. She's there, visible and solid and real. She looks back at him, considering. A tendril of black hair slivers free from the rest and curls up toward Night Eye. He eyes it cautiously until he sees that the end of it is wrapped around Lysani's handgun. My patience is wearing thin. Chisaki's voice, muffled as it is by the mask, still reaches them easily. Give me the girl. Are you really in a position to be making demands? Night Eye asks. It's 2 against 1, now. 3, if they count Ray. The look on Ray's face tells Izuku that she very much counts herself. Consider this, Chisaki says mildly. Having her with you does not guarantee your safety. If I have to tear you both apart and her along with you, then I will. I have a lot of practice putting her back together. Izuku opens his mouth to tell him where he can stick his demands. Ray unhinges her jaw and cuts him off with a rattling shriek that reverberates in the marrow of his bones. To Chisaki's credit, he only hesitates a little before he lunges forward to turn the room against them once more. A quirk-nullifying dart hits him right in the throat. His hands hit the ground and nothing happens. Night Eye lowers the gun with a satisfied huff. With an eerie calm, Chisaki pulls the dart out and tosses it aside. I'm sure you think you're very clever, but the bullets in that gun are quite temporary. The permanent serum is in very short supply. I cannot trust just anyone with it, even among my own men. You're still out of quirk, Izuku retorts. How long do you think you can last without it? Night Eye reaches out as if to hold him back. The purpose of my quirk is to destroy and rebuild, Chisaki replies with a disinterested shrug. It is, by its very nature, resistant to the temporary serum. It will be back shortly. How shortly? Well, you have no way of knowing that, I'm afraid. It's 2 minutes, a ghost says helpfully. You have 2 minutes. 2 minutes, good to know, Izuku says aloud, and the pregnant paws on Chisaki's and settles his nerves with satisfaction. Chisaki considers him for a while. I might take you along when I retrieve that, he says, nodding toward A. Something tells me I could learn a lot by studying you. Ray lunges forward with a snarl, but Izuku stops her. She turns to him with a dark scowl, skull flashing behind her face. You should stay back, Night Eye tells him. I can handle him without his quirk. It's a lie. Chisaki without his quirk is still formidable, and there's no way of knowing whether Night Eye can take him down before the serum wears off. 2 of them together might have a better chance, but 1 for all is gone. Izuku can feel that it's gone. He is strong enough from training, but the loss is clear. With 1 for all he had barely felt Air's weight on his back, but now, especially with his wound from Toga. Ray, he says. I have a job for you. Her scowl turns to a gentle frown, and then wide-eyed understanding when Izuku carefully lowers Eri to the ground. Eri, this is Ray. She's my sister. Eri is silent, staring at Ray with eyes as round as saucers. She steps forward at Izuku's encouraging nudge, and Rei's writhing shadows move to surround her protectively. Stay together, Izuku says to both of them. Rei, if anything happens, get her out. And if you run out of strength, come back and tell me. He smiles bleakly. Hopefully this won't take that long. Rei nods, takes Air's hand, and pulls her closer. Air stares at her, then back at Izuku. I'll be right back, he tells her with another smile. Don't worry, okay? This will all be over soon. Does it count as lying if he doesn't know the truth? The path to Tunnel 5N is a winding, circuitous maze that requires either a map or a very good memory. Thanks to the mess that Mimic left, it's even worse. In the area that he took control of, all rhyme and reason to the layout is gone, replaced with a hopeless snarl of tunnels and chambers. Luckily, Midoriya has never had to bother with all of that. When he's in costume, every path is a straight path. A quick detour takes him to 4W, and he quite literally pokes his head into a chamber to find Yukio and her interns battling with the architecture. Uraraka launches Hadou into the air, Asua scales the shifting walls to catch her in her tum and fling her into position, and finally an airborne Hadou unleashes a spiral blast into a bulge in the wall. The wall bursts open, and the body of Overhaul's henchman Mimic tumbles free. Yukio shifts smoothly from human to dragon form to snatch him up, only for the wall to bulge outward and catch him instead. They seem to have things handled. Midoriya leaves them to it, and continues on his way to find Overhaul in 5N. The further he gets from Mimic, the less twisted the tunnels become, until he's finally running straight down one, absolutely certain of the way to his destination. So far he hasn't gotten word that Overhaul's location has changed, and his hopes are high. Underneath, the instinctual fear of facing Overhaul swims in his gut. For all his confidence, he doesn't relish the thought of fighting him alone. Obviously he'll do it if it means Air never has to hurt again. He wasn't lying when he said he was best equipped for Overhaul's most formidable weapons. But it doesn't make him any less nervous. There's something to be said about fear, though. It keeps his senses sharp. He turns his torso intangible because that's what his body tells him to do, and the knife passes harmlessly through his lower stomach. Without his quirk, the blade would have gutted him. A second attack comes in the form of a stab to his neck, but by now he's spread his quirk to the entire upper half of his body. In a smooth, well-practiced move, he lets his arm turn solid again, grabs his attacker's wrist, and twists. The knife drops, only for another to appear in their other hand. A third knife swing passes through his chest, and he releases them and drops back for room to breathe. Totahemiko stands across from him, barefoot and grinning so wide that her gums are showing. Her clothes are bloody and several sizes too large, as if she stole them off of a body. Midoriya would rather not speculate. The villain looks down at the knife in her hand, its blade dry, and her smile fades to a pout. You have the worst quirk ever, she whines at him. Midoriya smiles brightly. Sorry to disappoint. Her eyes glitter in what little light the tunnel offers. That's okay, she says. I just have to try harder. Don't I, Tagada-senpai? She draws the sound out into a sing-song lilt. Midoriya's eyes narrow. He knows why she knows his name. She heard it from Midoriya back when she and Compress tried to take Era before. There's still something deeply uncomfortable about hearing her say it like that. Can you still bleed, senpai? She asks, and her high-pitched cutesy tone could not sound more wrong coming from a girl with blood around her mouth and a knife in her hand. Or if I cut you open, is there just air inside? Midoriya weighs his options. He still has to get to Overhaul before he moves on and they lose track of him again. But Totahemiko is still dangerous, and the way she uses her quirk makes her even more so. There's a murderous Yakuza leader in Tunnel 5N, but that doesn't change the fact that there's a serial killer standing right in front of him, and some of the blood on her knives belongs to Midoriya. He can make this quick. 100, 101, 102. That's close enough for Night Eye's liking. Less than 20 seconds, he calls to Midoriya. Start moving away. Midoriya, infuriatingly, keeps attacking for a handful of seconds. He aims for soft spots, painful spots, and Night Eye doesn't need years of experience to see the fury building within Chisaki's every move. Midoriya, now. The boy seems to ignore him as the seconds run out. Night Eye's heart is in his throat by the time he finally twists around behind Chisaki and drives a punishing blow into his lower back. Had he been using one for all, even at his low percentage, a hit like that would have destroyed the villain's kidney. It actually paralyzes Chisaki for all of 2 seconds, and Midoriya uses that to finally get clear. 120. Night Eye fires again, and it hits. Chisaki manages to mold the ground beneath Night Eye into spikes before the serum takes hold again. Night Eye avoids the worst of it, but one of the spikes tears through his suit and gougers into his side. A flesh wound, but still a liability in a fight. For a moment, Chisaki's wild eyes lock with his. Even from the distance, Night Eye can hear his breath hissing in his mask, betraying his rage. As soon as it's safe again, Midoriya continues his attack. He hasn't let up for a second, even though he has to be exhausted. Night Eye can see how much the boy has been holding back until this fight, because without one for all, he is vicious. Tucking the Handen away, Night Eye ducks under a protruding spike and rushes to join them. The fight reeks of desperation, and Night Eye can't be sure that any of it is Chisaki's. The villain is outnumbered and quirkless, but they are effectively quirkless as well. Midoriya still has his ghosts, and Night Eye can tell by the way he moves that he's getting boost here and there from them. 34, 35, 36. Midoriya launches himself off of a ridge and drives a kick into Chisaki's chest, throwing him backward with a grunt of pain. The villain twists, narrowly avoiding a cluster of spikes left by his own quirk when he could last use it. 41, 42, 43, 44. Seeing his in turn get that close to Chisaki still drives Night Eye's heart rate up, even as he moves in to get close himself. It's to his chagrin that he finds himself mimicking Midoriya's strategy. He aims for soft spots, pressure points, places he knows it will hurt. He aims for joints. He aims for organs. He aims low. Only rookies and blowhards worry about looking classy when they fight. The heroes that stay alive are the ones that know that there's no such thing as a pretty fist fight. Whoever hits first and hits hardest has the best chance of winning. The minutes run down in Night Eye's head, but Chisaki refuses to let up. It's a desperate fight on all sides, with Chisaki fighting to escape while Night Eye and Midoriya fight to stop him. They can't bring him down in this round either. 110, 111, 113. Get clear, he shouts. Now. Midoriya is already backing off as the words leave his mouth, weaving and climbing through the spikes and ridges. Chisaki pursues him, more used to navigating the effects of his own quirk than the boy is. As Midoriya moves away, Night Eye fights his way closer. The seconds run out. Night Eye aims and fires. The first shot misses and he curses the wasted bullet. Chisaki moves closer, one hand deep in his pocket. His free hand touches a spike, and the ground ripples and molds itself like living clay. All at once, Night Eye is on the defensive as the ground turns against him. Another spike tears through his leg, and his vision goes grey with pain when he puts his weight on it. There's a shout as Midoriya tries to reach him, but another lethal wave from Chisaki's quirk stops him from getting close. Go to A. It's an order, but Midoriya still hesitates. Go to A, now. He's not going anywhere, Chisaki informs him, and Night Eye realizes that the spikes around the boy have formed a cage. Facing the villain alone, Night Eye wrestles with his fears. If they lose the child, then all of this is for nothing. If he can't handle this, then what chance does the child have? She is a ghost with her, but how long will that last when Midoriya has no more one for all to give? As if in answer to his own thoughts, the ghost child Ray lets out an unearthly scream that reverberates through every inch of the cavern. The scream makes Chisaki pause, giving Night Eye a split second of opportunity. He fires off 2 more shots, and to his surprise and relief they actually hit, one in the throat and the other right between the eyes. Night Eye lets out the breath he was holding. They have time again. Maybe more than 2 minutes if 2 bullets hit him at once. Chisaki halts, breath hissing in a deep sigh. He sounds tired, not weary, but irritated. His hand comes out of his pocket holding a syringe. Night Eye lunges forward, but it's useless and he knows it. There's too much distance between them, too many obstacles, too much breathing room on Chisaki's and to stop him from inserting the needle into his own arm. For a moment there's nothing. And then, his body ripples. Night Eye's heart turns to a leaden pit in his chest. 2 bullets and Chisaki's quirk is still working, which can only mean that he just injected himself with. That's the first rule of creating a powerful weapon, Chisaki says serenely. Before their eyes, his face deconstructs and reconstructs itself. The bullets fall to the ground with a clatter. Have contingencies in case it is used against you. It's a little tasteless using trigger. I'll freely admit that. But oh, does it make me strong. Chisaki doesn't run through the severe terrain. He doesn't weave through the spikes, doesn't dart around the obstacles he made with his own hands. He flows through it. His body splits into tributaries of flesh, sloughing like a viscous liquid through the gaps in the terrain and reforming on the other side, for no other apparent purpose than to travel in a straight line. Just looking at it makes the bile rise in Night Eye's throat. This has been very interesting, Chisaki says. Goodbye. He doesn't move, doesn't bend down to touch the ground, doesn't move his hands from his sides. A spike bursts from the ground on its own with a shriek of tearing concrete, and then the room is silent again. Night Eye blinks, and the pain he registers is so intense that he can't even make a sound. It's the sort of pain that ought to make him fall to the ground, but, very strange, he can't fall either. Why is he still standing when he hurts that much? He looks down. Oh, that's why. His ears ring as Chisaki approaches him and puts a hand to his forehead. He should struggle, but he can't move. He can't even fall down, propped up as he is by the spike impaling him through the stomach. It hurts, doesn't it? I could stop the pain, you know. I could end it right now. But I won't. My mercy must be earned, and you haven't, I'm afraid. Night Eye shuts his eyes as if waiting for death. In the darkness of his closed eyelids, he looks into Chisaki's future. His heart sinks low in his blood-stained chest and does not rise again. Of course. Of course it would be that way. He was a fool to ever think otherwise. Chisaki walks away without killing him. Night Eye opens his tired eyes and resigns himself to watching the future play out a second time. With every blow that misses, every swing of her knife that permeates his body harmlessly, the bloodlust in Toga Himiko's eyes mounts. Miria can almost see foam flecking at her lips as she pulls them back in a grin that stretches from one side of her face to the other. Mirio drops into the floor, shoots back out, and misses her again. It's not that she's predicting where he'll strike, she just won't stop moving. When he's underground, he's blind, deaf, and suffocating. He only has intuition and past experience to suggest to him where she might move. But Toga Himiko seems to delight in defying expectations, and so every time Miria bursts from beneath the ground to aim a blow at her, he finds her well out of reach. This cycle happens about 4 times before Miria switches tactics. She's using the same strategy Midoriya did that time in the Uejin. It takes less energy for her to dodge than it does for Miria to repeatedly use his quirk, so as long as she keeps moving and predicting him, she can gradually wear him down. So Miria pops up topside one last time and attacks her head-on. He keeps one eye on the blade in her hand and one eye on the rest of her, so that he knows what parts of his body to turn permeable. He has to split his brain to do so, between dodging, countering, striking, and activating his quirk. One of the best skills he ever learned from So was how to multitask. Gradually, Toga's movements grow more and more erratic. She's getting angry, losing her hold on her temper, and that means she's one step closer to losing. An angry combatant is a careless one. With a scream of effort she swings her knife one last time, and instead of dodging or phasing through it, Miria drops one last time, activating and releasing his quirk almost immediately. This skill of his has been compared to teleporting and warping before, and for a good reason. In the blink of an eye he's behind her and sending a punishing blow into her lower back. Toga goes down choking on pain, and Miria closes in. She still fights madly, clawing and snapping with her knife and her bare hands, and it's a trial to stay solid enough to hold her while still phasing through her attacks. Stop, stop, he urges her, trying to wrest the knife from her hands. It's over. You have to know it's over. Her breath hisses in and out. She bares her teeth to the guns like a cornered dog, twisting and lashing out at any piece of him she can reach. He pins her roughly, hoping to slow her down by knocking the wind out of her. It works halfway, she gasps for breath but won't stop fighting him. He twists her wrist until the knife falls from her hand, and she screams more with fury than with pain. It's over, he tells her through gritted teeth. She tries to bite him, but her teeth close on nothing. She tries to kick him, and her foot passes through him harmlessly. He pins her down, untwisted so she can't use it against him, and she pulls out another knife with the other arm and swings it toward his face. He makes his whole head intangible to avoid it, and goes blind and deaf for a split second. He's tired of this. He wants this to be over. He's not even supposed to be fighting Toda. She's already held him up long enough that Chisaki's probably left Tunnel 5N by now. He's worried about the other heroes, about Sir and Midoriya and Tamaki and Hadu and the Yonder in turns. He's worried about A. He releases his quirk with a gasp as he breathes through his nose and mouth again. Hearing and vision come back, and he looks down at the villain he is pinned to the concrete floor. Midoriya stares up at him, eyes bright with fear and pain. Tagada-senpai. You are hurting me. It's not rational, not in the least. He knows what Toda's power is, and he knows it's her, but Midoriya's cracked, pained voice makes him freeze on instinct. The key to skill is experience, and Midoriya has never had a friend's face used against him like this before. His hesitation lasts only for a split second, but by the time it passes, there's already a knife beneath his ribs. He punches her in the jaw before she can twist or pull it out. Her eyes roll up in her head, and she goes limp. As Mirio gingerly rises to his feet, Midoriya's face starts to melt off. In seconds, he's left with a naked and unconscious Toda. Mirio hesitates. He's loath to just leave her here, where she might wake up and continue making trouble. But he doesn't have a radio on him, and he has to go. Even if it's harder to fight while injured, he has to at least check to see if Overhaul is where he's supposed to be. In the end, he tears a strip from his cape and binds Toda's hands behind her back. Her knives are gone, one is on the ground and the other is in his body. If she had any more, then they've disappeared along with her clothes. He retrieves the dropped knife and carries on. The room heaves again, threatening to swallow him whole. Izuku takes a desperate flying leap off of the ridges perched on. With one for all he could clear the immediate danger easily, but without it, the strength in his body just isn't enough. He throws a hand out, and several ghosts grab him and pull. Others boost him from behind, and the ghosts around him heave and drag him to safety. He scrambles over the pit as it surges up and closes beneath him, inches away from catching him like a giant, jagged mouth. Izuku tumbles to relative safety and keeps moving. This isn't a fight anymore. He can't touch Chisaki, can't approach him, can't slow him down. He can't even get close enough to see if he has another quirk suppression weapon. His hands and face are scraped and bleeding, his costume torn, his body bruised and aching, and that's just from fighting the environment. He hasn't gotten close to Chisaki since before. Izuku races through the forest of concrete spikes as the ground trembles and pitches again. It throws him off his feet, he cracks his knees on the ground, stumbles upright, and keeps running. The ground bounces him again, and he rolls to a stop at the edge of a blood spatter. Izuku lifts his eyes to see Night Eye watching him, still held upright on the spike that punched clear through him. His heart plummets when he sees the hero's face. He's seen enough ghosts to know what despair looks like. Many of them are gathered around Night Eye right now, clustered together, as if waiting for one more of Chisaki's victims to join them. As Izuku picks himself up, he looks beyond Night Eye to find Rei with her arms around Era, holding her close and surrounding her as best she can. His first instinct is dismay, because it can't be good for Era to see Night Eye like this, but he can see why Rei brought her here. For all that Chisaki has been tossing him around like a ragdoll, he's left the area around Night Eye more or less alone. If Night Eye were caught up in the turbulence, he wouldn't last long. He's going to die either way if they don't get help soon. Apparently Chisaki doesn't want that to happen too fast. A thread of white-hot rage drifts into the fear rolling in his stomach. He fights against it, trying to drown it in forced calm. It's dangerous to get angry in a fight that is already losing, but he's trying to think of a new plan, and there just isn't one. Their only hope is for Tagada to find out Chisaki isn't in the other tunnel and come back to them. His only option is to stay alive and drag this out. He could send Rei to fetch him, but is not sure he can keep Eri out of Chisaki's hands by himself. Does anyone know where Tagada is? He asked the ghosts around him. Blood runs down his face from a cut near his hairline, sticking in his eye. There's murmuring among them. It may take some time for them to have an answer, and he doesn't have time. Night Eye. It hurts to look at him. He's seen worse on ghosts, of course he's seen worse, but it's different when Night Eye is still alive and he can't just will those awful wounds away with a change in his mood. If you use your quirk on me, could you tell me how long it'll take Tagada to get back? The hero looks at him with dull eyes and Izuku's heart sinks again. It's an optimistic question to ask because it bears the assumption that he'll survive long enough for Tagada's arrival to show up in his future. "I'm sorry," Naito rasps. "I'm so sorry, before Chisaka left, I looked into his future." He breaks off with a wet cough and a dark trickle down his chin reaches his collar to stain it deep red. "You might as well tell me," Izuku says wearily. "According to you, it's not going to make a difference anyway." For a moment, Night-Eye hesitates. "Then, he kills you," he says, and every word sounds like an apology. "He takes Eri and kills you when you try to stop him from leaving with her. He escapes." "Ah. Well, that was one of the things he expected." "Oh," he says, and then, "Okay." Chisaki approaches them at a leisurely pace. Izuku braces himself to start moving again. He has to draw him away before he gets close enough to reach Eri. "This can stop at any time," the villain says, and Izuku contemplates spitting at him before he realizes that Chisaki isn't looking at him at all. This doesn't have to continue, and you know that. Caught between Rei's arms, surrounded by twisting shadows, Eri trembles under Chisaki's stare. "Stop this pointless rebellion, do as you're told, and come back where you belong," Chisaka tells her. "Do that, and this will stop. I'll even put them back together for you, good as new." "You will." Eri's voice is small, but for now the room is still enough for the sound to carry. "He won't," Izuku says loudly. "He's lying, Eri. Believe me, I know a liar when I see one." "Such a hypocrite you are," Chisaki says to him. "You preach goodness and safety and freedom, while trapping her from doing what she truly wants." Rei's angry snarl almost cuts off his next words. "You claim to care about her, but you won't even allow her this one choice. Heroes like you really are a sickness." The rage slithers upward in his chest, eager and hungry. "Yeah, sorry, it's terminal," he says. He looks at Chisaki's jacket, his pockets, even the folds of his shirt underneath, searching for the telltale shape of a handgun. "I've been trying to cough in your stupid face all day. Maybe you'll catch some basic decency." He doesn't see anything. "Where is it?" Chisaki barely looks at him before his body partially liquefies again and flows straight to where Rei and Eri are standing. Izuku yells, but his voice is drowned out when Rei's head splits in half at the jaw, her shadows go wild and half swallow Eri in darkness, and Rei screams. Fear explodes outward from her like a wave of force, churning Izuku's insides until he almost throws up. He's not the only one who feels it. Chisaki's viscous form stops in its tracks and convulses violently in midair. It almost hurts to watch, like magnetic liquids meeting and reacting violently to each other. Throwing caution to the wind, Izuku rushes toward them. Hands catch him by the elbow and nearly wrench his shoulder, pulling him back. "Pro tip, kid, that's point for point how I bid it," Magna hisses close to his ear. "I have to," Izuku chokes out. "I have to get Eri, or they said Chisaki might have those bullets, and maybe." "Did you bother checking the other one first?" Magna asks. "Nemoto ain't an expendable." Izuku stops in his tracks. "Sir, when you dealt with Nemoto, was he armed?" he asks. "Handgun," Naito replies. "Dropped him before he could shoot. Ground changed before I could take it." "I'll be right back," he says, and takes off in the direction the ghosts are pointing. Even without the help, even with the drastically changed landscape of the cavern, Izuku can still see the dark, limp shape of Nemoto's unconscious body. He's draped against a few spikes and pillars, lying at their base instead sticking on the ends. It seems that Chisaki took care not to kill him by accident. Either he does care about some of his henchmen, or he was worried about damaging the gun and its special ammunition. It's fine either way. With Nemoto alive, there's one less ghost loyal to Chisaki, and Izuku is just as capable of using the undamaged gun as anyone else. He's less than halfway there when he drops. He doesn't register it as pain, at least not at first. But all at once, a feeling of something is wrong washes over him, and in the blink of an eye he's on the ground like a downed deer. A split second later the pain hits him, blinding, white-hot and intense. He looks down and finds a long spire of concrete sticking straight through his thigh from back to front. Unlike Night Eyes, it was thin enough to snap off when he fell, and leaving a concrete spike about a half-meter long sticking through his leg like a javelin. "Watch out!" Scattered, ragged warning cries reach him. Izuku rolls over on his back just in time to see Chisaki's shapeless form flowing swiftly toward him. He tries to scramble backward, but the torn-up ground and the spike in his leg slow him so severely that it hardly makes a difference. Another rattling scream rings out, and a familiar mass of shadows overtakes Chisaki immediately. In an instant, Rei is materializing over Izuku, placing herself firmly between him and the oncoming danger, and Izuku sees the villain's ploy. Rei, no. Go back. It's too late. The moment Rei starts taking shape over Izuku, the liquid flesh retreats at a rapid rate. Heedless of Izuku screaming, Chisaki regains his shape and grabs Eri, who now stands alone and unprotected. The terror freezes on her face. She doesn't fight him or run away. She just watches him with wide, unblinking eyes and goes very, very still. "Oh, Eri," Izuku hears the villain say. "If only you hadn't been so much trouble. You might have saved them." Chisaki turns his head just enough to meet Izuku's eyes and lifts his hand. The room goes wild again. Ghost Boy him up, dragging and tossing him away from the danger, lending him the speed he doesn't have. Izuku narrowly misses death more times than he can count before the heaving finally abates. When it does, and the tearing and groaning of concrete finally goes quiet, he can hear her screaming. She isn't struggling or fighting, but she's digging her fingers into the arm Chisaki has around her, screaming bloody murder as her captor tries to kill him. Let this be a lesson to you. This is what happens when you spread your curse to others. Izuku is sick and tired of hearing Chisaki's voice. Something cold and hard is pressed into his hands. He looks down to find Rei, wide-eyed and shamefaced, manipulating his fingers to grip it. The sparks of One for All are beginning to fade from her form as she passes Nemoda's handgun into his grasp. While Chisaki is looking at Eri instead of him, Izuku aims and fires. It hits, and he knows it hits because Chisaki's form goes haywire again. It ripples like liquid, and for a moment it's almost as if he's lost control of his own shape. The arm holding Eri turns to sludge, only to solidify around her again, tighter this time. Izuku could swear, just for a moment, that her horn looks longer than it did before. Chisaki rounds on Izuku again as he limps closer, hands trembling around the handgun. His face melts and unmelts before the bullet finally pops free of his shifting flesh and bounces harmlessly off the ground. "Nice try," he snarls, eyes burning with rage over the edge of the mask. "But the trigger in my body can counter even the permanent serum. I'm powerful enough to destroy it before it destroys my quirk." "Trigger won't last forever," Izuku retorts. Chisaki's hand comes up again. "It will last long enough." The room trembles as he prepares to mold it again. Something strange happens. There's a burst of something like light, and Izuku can't pinpoint the source at first. But is distracted when Chisaki's body goes haywire again, as if he's been shot with another bullet. His form melts so severely that he drops Eri, and she tumbles to the ground but never, not even for a moment, stops touching him. It's coming from her, Izuku realizes through the haze of pain and held-back fury. It's coming from her horn, which has grown from a tiny sprout to half the length of her hand. And then Chisaki snaps back into shape, and Eri scrambles away from him. He doesn't go after her at first because he's too busy trying to contort his body again, trying to wield his quirk from afar, but it just isn't working. She rewound him. She sent him back to before he took trigger. Izuku is already running, somewhat. It's hard to run properly with his legs skewered, but a little adrenaline goes a long way. Chisaki touches the ground and sends up a wall to block him, then lunges for Eri. He grabs her again, and this time she twists and screams. Ghosts shout warnings to Izuku, but he blocks them out. He crumpled once. He almost let someone take her once, and it's not happening ever again. He reaches for her, and she reaches back for him. He gets close enough to grasp her hand, then her shoulder, and drags her bodily out of Chisaki's arms when the villain's hand reaches out. Izuku moves on instinct alone, twisting away to shield Eri's body with his own. Chisaki touches his shoulder. There's pain. That's the first thing he registers, and for a moment or more it's all he can register, so much pain, crashing in all at once, that he can't fit anything else in his head. He pulls away when he finally remembers to do so. The touch vanishes and the pain vanishes with it. And then there's rage. There was so much pain within him, filling him up until he was bursting with it, that with it gone, there's a split second of sucking emptiness before his eyes fall on Chisaki and he remembers that he is angry. And suddenly, anger is all that he is. His fist is flying into Chisaki's face before he can think of anything else. Cold satisfaction floods through the burning fury when it connects. He hits him again and feels bone give way under his knuckles. He hits and hits until he feels blood running over his knuckles and his heart sings. He might be screaming. He might be doing a lot of things. It's almost refreshing to find that he doesn't care. He doesn't care about what else is happening. There's no room for other concerns. There's no room for thought. There is only rage and vengeance and the overwhelming desire to hit him again, to make him bleed, to take Chisaki's throat in his hands and squeeze until he can tear the ghost right out of his body. Wait. Wait, that's not right. There are other things to think about. There's Night Eye. There's Eri. Where's Eri? He was just holding her, wasn't she? Did Chisaki take her back? Fear joins the anger. They churn together, just as all-consuming, but now diluting each other. Izuku blinks, his eyes clear, and he looks at Chisaki to find him empty-handed. He's also standing still, staring at Izuku with shock. Confusion, fear. That can't be right. Why would Chisaki be afraid of him? Izuku looks around as if the concrete spikes can offer an answer and finds Night Eye's face instead. The hero's expression is disturbingly similar to Chisaki's, but there's no fear in him. It's more like... what's the word for it? Why is everyone staring at him? He's fighting a villain. He's a hero. That's what he does. What's so shocking about that? Is there something on his face? He looks down at himself, and it takes a moment to comprehend what he's seeing. Oh, he says when he finally does. His arm's gone, that's a good place to start. The shoulder's gone with it, along with a good portion of his chest. That could explain why Chisaki looks afraid, why Night Eye looks shocked. Izuku's a little shocked himself, because he shouldn't be able to fight like this. Adrenaline is one thing, but this, he shouldn't be able to move. How is he even still standing? He looks at Chisaki again. Chisaki looks back. His eyes flicker to a point somewhere behind Izuku, and Izuku turns. He's lying amid broken concrete and fallen spikes, crumpled up with his arm and shoulder and part of his chest missing. The ground beneath him is soaked with blood. Eri crouches by it, wide-eyed and mute with shock. Beyond her, Chisaki's army of vengeful ghosts gape openly. For once, they are all silent, every last soul looking either at him or at the pitiful crumpled thing on the ground, which is also Hen. That's his body, Izuku thinks. He's standing up and looking down at his body. Oh. He looks down at his hands and wonders if they're pale beneath the gloves. He wonders if his eyes are white. Okay. He turns back to Chisaki. The rage is still there, churning and violent, but it's diluted with other things. Fear, yes. Dread. Determination. Hope, brought on by the sight of blood and bruising on Chisaki's face. He can touch him. He wants to touch him, wants to hurt him. He hurt Air, hurt Night Eye, hurt everyone. Everyone in this room is dead because of him. The emotions are loud, louder than they've ever been before. They ought to be, without a body, they are all he has. They are all that he is. It's like a whirlwind inside of him, and if he isn't careful, he'll lose himself to the howling storm. Sir, that's a problem for later, he says out loud, and even his own voice sounds strange to him now. I'm gonna beat the shit out of you now. Chisaki breathes in through the mask, and Izuku slams into him before he can speak. The force of the blow sends him flying through the jagged terrain he made himself, and he only avoids shattered bones by destroying each spike and ridge as he crashes through them. When he comes to a halt at least, still battered and bleeding in spite of his efforts, Izuku is upon him, beating him back down with his one remaining fist. The taste of blood is sharp on his tongue, and the storm inside of him once more. Struggling upright, Chisaki slams his hand into Izuku's broken chest, but nothing happens. His quirk can't touch the things that ghosts are made of. How, Chisaki rasps. How I killed you. Izuku spits the memory of blood. He thinks back to before Chisaki did what he did, before his body was torn apart and broken, and when he looks down again, his arm is good as new. Looks like it, he says. What's your plan now, Kai? He looks into Chisaki's eyes and sees fear bleeding through. Izuku's heart isn't doing much beating at the moment, but he still feels hope in it all the same. Midoriya races back and forth from one end of Tunnel 5N to the other, leaving dazed and unconscious villains in his wake. Quite a few that he comes upon are already incapacitated, and that just makes his job easier. He doesn't even need his usual underground tricks to take out the rest. Bullets fly straight through him, and none of the villains seem to have a plan beyond shooting at him. At one point, instinct takes over before common sense can rein it in, and he drops beneath the feet of a hulking pyrokinetic hopped up on Trigger. There's no getting around it. He can't predict flames well enough to slip through them, so he brute forces his way through the fight and drops the man before he can burn the whole tunnel and everyone in it. Luckily, the trigger effects are almost up, and unconsciousness snuffs out his quirk rather than sending it further out of control. Midoriya pauses, breathing hard, and curses himself when he spots a blooded knife lying on the floor right where he dropped through. He forgot about Toga's knife. The blade was the only thing keeping his wound from bleeding faster. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he tears another piece from his cape and stuffs it into the wound. It's not the best first aid job, but it's the best he's going to get, and it won't fall out if he uses his quirk. Running footsteps set him on edge before he rounds a corner and almost collides with Yukio and her interns. Froppy has a bandage around her arm and her do looks half drained, but they are all still in one piece. Is Mimic taken care of? He asks. He's been delivered to police custody, Yukio replies. Anything to report? A Razorhead has been captured, Midoriya replies, and winces when Froppy and Iravati gasp. And we had word that Overhaul was somewhere in Tunnel 5N, but I've searched back and forth and I haven't found anyone but Yakuza foot soldiers. I ran into Toga Himika, though. I don't have a radio on me, so I couldn't call it in, and I had to prioritize finding Overhaul. He winces. If I'd known he was already gone, I wouldn't have left her. I'll have someone retrieve her, Yukio assures him, and turns on her radio to do just that. It's all right, I can go back for her, Midoriya says. She was in the part of the tunnels that Mimic changed. I know where I left her, and I can get back to her faster. He starts to turn back, then pauses. Can you get in contact with Night Eye and Deku? They're guarding Eri, and they should know that Overhaul's still in the wind. We'll take care of it, Yukio assures him, and Midoriya takes off through tunnels and walls, back the way he came. He's already out of earshot when Yukio and her interns try to contact his mentor and Kohai and get no response. Eri curls up at the base of a concrete spike and makes herself as small as possible. She doesn't make a sound, doesn't move even to cover her ears against the sound of the ground rumbling and ripping up. She doesn't cry. Her head hurts. Her skin feels hot. There's a buzzing underneath that makes her itch. She doesn't know what to do. The blood on the ground almost reaches her feet. In the middle of it, Deku lies with his eyes closed as if he's only sleeping. Beyond him, the man that everyone calls Night Eye still hangs on a spike over his own patch of blood. He's dying, and Deku is already dead on the ground. Eri knew this would happen. Chisaki told her it would happen. She always knows what's going to happen when Chisaki is around. Chisaki gets mad and people die. Chisaki puts her in the chair, takes her apart, and puts her back together. Chisaki sends people to be nice to her, but no matter how soft they talk or how many toys they bring her, they still take her to Chisaki when he tells them to. That's what happens. She knows that. But she doesn't know what's going to happen now. A lot of things have happened that have never happened before, ever since Deku first touched her. She's never spent so long with people who don't hurt her. Shots don't count, Deku says. She's never heard anyone say that Chisaki is wrong and Chisaki is a liar. She's never fought and struggled and screamed before. She did it because he was a liar. She didn't fight him when he tried to take her again. She stayed still and let him touch her and pick her up, and he still turned around and tried to kill Deku again. He's a liar, and that means Deku was right, and that's why she. But most of all, she's never seen someone get back up after Chisaki killed them. Not without Chisaki putting them back together himself. She's never seen anyone beat Chisaki before, either, and she hasn't seen that yet. Deku is still fighting, pale and grinning and scary, scarier than anything Eri has ever seen before, but he hasn't beaten Chisaki yet. But she's seen all the other never-befores now. So what if she doesn't know? Suddenly, Eri is cold again. That means she's here. Rei is scary like Deku is scary, not at Eri but around her. Rei points her scary at other people. I'm sorry. Rei talks funny. Her voice is always like a whisper. Even when she screams so loud it hurts Eri's ears, there's still a hush behind it. You should have stayed with him, Eri says. You came back to protect me instead of him, and now he's dead. Still fighting, but still dead. What will happen when there's nothing left to fight? While he disappears, Rei holds out her hands. The sparks inside of her are fading. Every now and then she disappears and reappears as if her whole body is blinking. I'm running out, she says. I can't stay like this. My little brother can't either. We'll disappear soon. Eri closes her eyes. Of course it doesn't matter in the end. Of course it couldn't last. Night Eye will die, and Deku and Rei will disappear, and Chisaki will take her back before Lemillion or anyone else finds them. Of course, of course, of course. Maybe Deku was wrong and she really is cursed. Cold hands hold hers and she opens her eyes. Rei's eyes drip like she's crying, but it's all black instead of clear tears. Help him, she says. Please. Eri stares at her, eyes wide. I can't. You can. The hand squeeze and the cold spreads from Eri's fingers all the way up her arms. I saw you. The man who hurt you, he changed himself, and you put him back the way he was. More black stuff pours from her eyes and a little from her mouth when she says, please. Please put my little brother back the way he was. I don't want him to die. I don't want to leave yet. I'll hurt him, Eri whispers. She remembers arms around her, holding her and lifting her until suddenly they were gone, and the warmth was gone, and everything was gone. He's already dead, Rei whispers, and then she's gone. No more shadows, no more black eyes, no more cold hands. All that's left is blood and rocks and the pain in Eri's head, and the hot buzzing and prickling under her skin. It's all over her and inside her, it's growing and pushing, it wants out, out, out. She doesn't cry. She doesn't ask any more questions. There's no one to ask, and she already knows what the answers are. Eri crawls through blood and dust and broken concrete. Izuku aims another punch at Chisaki that passes through him, and he almost loses himself again. It's all he can do just to keep himself together. The pain is fresh in his mind, and when he thinks too much about it, his left arm forgets that it's allowed to be there. His mouth never quite loses the taste of blood. He pulls himself together, more literally than usual, and his next blow connects. Just a little longer, and Miria will be here. That's all he needs to do, by time. Just a little longer, and then he can fall apart. As soon as he's finished doing what needs to be done, then whatever happens will happen. He's dead, and one for all will die with him. Chisaki keeps touching him, grabbing him, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. His quirk can't hurt him anymore, and even when Chisaki hits him the pain is distant, as if it only hurts because Izuku knows that it should. He's not feeling it, only remembering it. Another punch turns to mist, and Chisaki's eyes glitter with frantic hope. You can't keep this up forever, he says. You're only prolonging the inevitable. And why should you care anyway? I've already killed you. The rage takes over again, and his arm and shoulder vanish before the next punch can land. He opens his mouth to answer, and all that comes out is blood and screaming. You failed, Chisaki says, and his voice grinds like sand in the cracks of Izuku's control, irritating and constant and inescapable. You haven't just died. You've died for nothing. One for all dies with him. He screams again, just like Rei, like Tsubasa and the Numi ghosts, like Okamura and Eri's father and Sachi on the beach and countless others. He screams because he's made of fear and despair and pain and helpless rage, and he can't even properly feel how much it hurts. Deku. The voice cuts through the storm, punching straight through the whirlwind until it reaches Izuku in the eye. Blood pours from his lips as he turns to follow it back to where Night Eye stands, still upright and clinging to life. He's goading you, Night Eye rasps. Don't fall for your own trick. Right. He's right. Izuku struggles against the choking rage, fighting to tamp it down until he can think clearly again. Familiar cold hands clutch his arm, and the chill spreads through him, breathing life into the spark of focus buried under the ender. The cool determination amplifies, diluting the rage until he can finally bleed it off and pour the excess into a ruthless punch to Chisaki's stomach. The villain gags. Izuku hopes he's puking into that stupid mask. He can feel himself flickering. Already he's used too much strength all at once, he'll run out before long, and what then? A half-familiar voice breathes against his ear. "Don't be mad," Ray whispers. "I asked her to." Before Izuku can ask her what she means, Chisaki's eyes flicker past him and go wide. "No," he hisses. "No." Izuku feels a tug. It comes from somewhere in the pit of his stomach, like a hook caught in his core and slowly dragging him back. He turns, following the line of Chisaki's eyes. Era stares back at him from where she's crouched over his body, clutching his hand with both of hers. Her horn, now the width of her hand, lights up like a star. Chisaki lunges for her, with Izuku close behind him. The world turns sideways and inside out, and then, just for a moment, it vanishes. Reality slams back into him with the force of a bullet train. His senses drown him, his lungs are empty, and it's all he can do to open his mouth as wide as his jaws will allow and swallow down a desperate, starving breath. It's not nearly enough, so he takes another and another. He can feel again. He can see and hear and smell and taste and breathe again. He didn't spend long without those things, only a few minutes at most, but it was easy, so easy to forget. He lies there and breathes again, curls his fingers into fists. One hand and then the other. He squeezes until the nails dig into his palms and he breathes. A hand comes hard across his face, shattering the stunned pace. His eyes clear and Magna's angry face looms over his. "Get up," she snaps. "We are not done here." Shadows creep in from all sides as Ray makes her displeasure known. Magna flinches but does not draw away. "Get up, little hero brat. You know damn well what we are owed. Please." Era's father's face joins the villain's, wild with desperation. "You have to get up." He's taking her. Izuku is on his feet so fast that his vision goes dark for a moment. By the time it clears, Chisaki has reached the opposite wall with air in his grasp. It's the very wall that he made himself to block off their escape route. With one touch, he tears it open. Instinct tells him to rush forward and stop Chisaki himself, and it frightens him how simple it would be to die again. It would take Chisaki no effort to destroy him again, and Izuku can't ask air to save him a second time. His breaths still come in noisy gasps. The air down here is stale, but compared to the nothing of moments before, it's the sweetest that Izuku has ever tasted. He takes in the darkness of the blood-strewn cavern. Night Eye. The ghosts. They fill the cave, scattered amid the pits and ridges and spikes that Chisaka left. Chusa is not among them, he hasn't seen her since the battle began, and he will never truly know what happened to her. None of them are watching him anymore. There's only one man drawing their eyes. You know what we are owed. There's only question left worth asking in Izuku's mind: did she go back far enough? The answer comes in the lightning at his fingertips, spreading along his arms, overtaking his body until his veins course with power. It fills him up, 5%, then 10, then 20 and climbing until it can grow no further. He stands still, filled to the brim with every drop of power given to him. It knows what to do and where it's needed. He lets it go. The change is palpable in the air. Izuku knows this because he sees Night Eye stir and he watches Chisaka stumble and look back. The cavern is crowded, and for the first time, Izuku isn't the only one who sees it. Chisaka turns to run, but even he can't move faster than the dead. Ghosts fill the escape route, blocking him in, surrounding him. A mass of shadows wheeze among them, and Ray tears air from the villain's grasp. The ghosts part to let them through, too focused on Chisaki to care about the little girl with the sparking horn. They see Chisaki looking at them, and their voices shake the concrete. The cavern rocks again, the ground undulates like an ocean wave, but the dead are unmoved. "Get back!" Chisaka roars. "Get away from me! You're dead. Every single one of you is dead." Their voices ring out, some with fury, others with eager, mocking laughter. Look at him squirm. "Not so tough without all your little toadies, are you? I can't believe was loyal to this line. I served him and he threw me away like yesterday's trash. Who's the trash now, Chisaki? You killed me. You destroyed everything I loved. I never did anything to you. I didn't even know you. A little girl. You did that to a little girl. The only sick one here is you, villain. Street bastard. Scum. Monster. Izuku feels the whirlwind again, this time all around him instead of within. He's at the eye of the storm, watching as the rage gathers and builds. Blank eyes turn to him, eager and grateful for the power he's letting them borrow. He doesn't shout, but it feels as if his voice reaches every corner of the cavern. Make him pay. The storm swallows Chisaki whole. Hey, Tsuyu-chan, Ochiko says, pausing in the middle of the tunnel. Did you feel that? Reluctantly, Tsuyu stops to wait for her. We have to keep moving, she says. If we stop, then we are more likely to run into villains before we find Fat Gun. Communications on the radio indicated that Fat Gun's comm was either damaged or malfunctioning. Yuki set them as messengers while she and Nejai-senpai went looking for Aizawa-sensei. To her surprise, Ochiko shakes her head and stays still. Her eyebrows are drawn together and she seems to be listening. Tsuyu takes her hand. The tunnels have been shaking for a while, she says more quietly. It's probably overhaul, so we need to hurry. I'm not talking about the shaking, Ochiko insists. It's not even shaking, Tsuyu, do you really not feel that? Feel what? Tsuyu's voice dies in her mouth. It's not that she sees her breath. But there's a certain feeling she gets when she sees it without expecting it, a feeling of wrong and be careful that might have something to do with how the cold affects her. It's hard to explain, but it's the closest she can come to putting the feeling of that tunnel into words. Tsuyu knows better than to ignore her senses when they tell her something is wrong. She squeezes Ochiko's hand and steps closer, listening. There's nothing. She can't hear anything. I don't know, she says at last. But we need to keep moving. They continue on, without letting go of each other's hands. The feeling doesn't fade, and eventually Ochiko stops again, this time at a cross-section of tunnels. Ochiko, come on, Tsuyu urges, and the feeling of not right grows and grows until... Oh, thank goodness. There are no footsteps, not even a disturbance in the air, just silence in one moment and a voice in the next. Tsuyu whirls around, tense and ready, only to stop short in confusion. A woman stands about a stone's throw away, watching them from one of the connecting hallways. She's youngish, maybe 30, and the look on her face when she sees them is one of relief. At least, Tsuyu assumes she's looking at them. It's hard to tell when her eyes are empty white, without any visible irises or pupils. Even stranger, the woman is soaking wet from head to toe. She's not dressed like a hero, nor does she look anything like the Yakuza foot soldiers they've been seeing all over the place. She looks like someone shoved her into a pool fully clothed. Ochiko has gone still. I'm so very sorry to bother you, the woman says. I know you must be busy, but, please. He needs help. The hero in Tsuyu latches onto that hard, but the rest of her can't let go of how this is. Who are you, she asks. How did you get in here? There really isn't time, the woman says, as more water rolls off of her in rivulets, forming. Wait. It's not forming any puddles. The ground isn't even wet underneath her. Confusion turns to suspicion. Is this an illusion? A distraction? Ochiko steps forward, and Tsuyu opens her mouth to warn her back when her friend speaks first, eyes fixed on the woman in the tunnel. You're one of Deku's friends, she says. Aren't you? What? The woman smiles. I'm so glad I found you. It would be a nightmare getting anyone else to listen to me. Is something wrong with Deku? Ochiko asks. Is he in trouble? It was touch and go for a moment, the woman says, grimacing. But I think he's all right for now. No, it's a Razorhead. He's in a lot of trouble right now, and there isn't a lot of time, so please. Lead the way, Ochiko says. Tsuyu stares at her, appalled. Ochiko. It's okay, Ochiko says, already hurrying toward the woman even as Tsuyu tries to hold her back. We'll explain later, but we have to hurry. She's not even there. Tsuyu squeezes her hand, pulled forward unwillingly toward the danger. Ochika, look at the water. It's tripping off her, but there's nothing on the ground. There's no one there. Instead of realizing the deception, Ochika doesn't even look surprised. She turns back and fixes Tsuyu with a pleading look. Please just trust me, she says. We have to help Aizawa-sensei. To the woman she says, lead the way, hurry. Thank you, the pale woman says and vanishes before their eyes. She reappears further down the tunnel, waiting for them. Ochika runs after her without a moment's hesitation, and Tsuyu has no choice but to follow. Shouda knows that something has changed when the sound of pacing stops. There's a rumble in the distance before silence falls again. For a moment, Shouda can barely even hear the villains breathing. There's a new note of tension in the air, like a subsonic hum that Shouda's ears can just barely pick up. Something's wrong, Kurono says tightly. The men with him stir uneasily. Should we leave one of the masks? Shut up, Kurono snaps. You know your orders. We wait for a signal from Chisaki. Okay, is the subdued reply. I mean, you were the one who just said something was wrong, so he falls silent at another barked order. Shouda wishes he could say. Not moving is bad enough, but he lowers the blindness. He hates not knowing what is coming. We could ask, someone else suggests cautiously. In case the situation has changed and is too occupied to inform us of any new orders. If he's occupied, then I'm not going to interrupt him with your inane questions. The tension hasn't left Kurono's voice. He's nervous and too young and inexperienced to hide it properly. He's not to be disturbed until he has the girl in hand and the heroes guarding her are dead. We'll hear back once he's done with them. Protective fury burns low and hot in Shouda's chest. 4 of his students are out there. He should be helping them, not trapped and blind and surrounded by villains. There were a dozen different ways to avoid this. Kurono had been aiming his quirk at Midoriya. If Aizawa hadn't taken the hit for him, then he could have taken the villain on himself and erased its effects. Hell, he could have pulled the kid out of the way instead of jumping between them like some boneheaded Ricky. Damn hindsight. He waits, counting the seconds as they tick by. He's lost count of how long he's been here. He has no idea whether Kurono's quirk has some kind of limit, timed or otherwise. He doesn't know where he is in relation to any possible escape routes, or if any escape routes even exist. He can pinpoint the locations of the villains around him, but they keep shifting and pacing. From the quiet, a crackle and squeal reaches Shouda's ears. It's the sound of a com dying. Kurono fumbles it, demands an explanation over it. There's no reply. The silence that follows is suffocating. Something's wrong, he repeats. Damn it. He shouldn't be taking this long. The heroes should have been staining the walls by now. He curses, kicks something in frustration. Fine. Fine. We are leaving. We'll regroup with Chisaki outside. Should we take a race ahead? A pause. No, Kurono says. He'll slow us down, and if anything has happened to Kai, which I highly doubt, but one can't be too safe, he'll be more trouble than he's worth. He sighs, harsh and angry. Shouda indulges the faint hope that he'll be left here for one of his allies to find. But no, of course not. The rasp of the blade, his own knife that Kurono took, reveals the villain's intentions. Oh well, Kurono says. One less carrier to spread the sickness. And then the temperature drops. Or it doesn't. The room doesn't feel any colder. Shouda's body just thinks it does, because every hair on his arms and the back of his neck is standing on end. Above him, Kurono goes still. Hey, buddy. I wouldn't do that if I were you. It's the voice of a kid, still cracking and uneven in the midst of dripping and pitch. A teenager, but not one of his kids, nor Tagada, nor a Magiki. His heart sinks when he doesn't recognize the voice. Yakuzas recruit kids when they can, and for an invasion like this, that requires a lot of canned fodder. Who the hell are, Kurono barks out, before one of his own underlings cuts him off. His head. The tone leaps up in pitch. What happened to his fucking head? Gasps. Shuffling, as if they are drawing away. Are they retreating from a kid? Oh, this, the kid says, cheerful and glad. Got stabbed. I wouldn't worry about it. You should probably worry more about your own selves. The others are busy tearing up your boss, but they might break off, get bored. After that, they are coming straight for you. What are you talking about? Kurono demands. Tearing up, that's impossible. Anyone who gets close to Kai is as good as dead. There's a beat. The boy laughs. It's a full belly laugh, the kind that makes you double up and wheeze for breath. By the time the brief fit passes, Shada can almost hear Kurono seething. I mean, the kid says, still giggling. You're not wrong. Right on the money, actually. Smart guy, I'll give you that. Realization blows. Shada would freeze in place if he weren't already held still. What is that supposed to mean? One of the villains mutters. How about this, smart guy, the boy continues. Remember Officer Shigeyama? No. Come on, it's not every day you break into a guy's house, club his wife to death while he watches, and slit his throat. Do you really not remember? Course he does, and so does his wife. Another thick, heavy silence. Who are you? Kurono asks, and either he can't hide the shaking in his voice, or he isn't trying anymore. Just some guy, the kid answers. Don't worry about me, I'm not gonna touch you, because you're not my problem yet. Yet? Just walk away, the boy says. Go ahead, I won't stop you. I've even given you a warning, right? About the Shigeyamas. Just put the knife down and walk away, and we won't have any problems. Okay. Cause if that knife touches a razorhead. There's another pause, and when the boy speaks next, his tone has shifted to a wavelength that vibrates in the bone marrow. You're really not gonna like what happens next. One of the villains swears and stumbles back. Oh, really? Kurono retorts, calling the bluff. What's gonna happen next, kid? What are you going to do? A few moments pass in silence again, stretching longer than the others. Shada waits, still frozen and helpless, until some kind of verdict is reached. Oh, sorry, the kid breaks the silence. Did you want an answer to that, or was it rhetorical? Kurono growls impatiently under his breath. Because the answer to that is, the kid stops talking again, humming to himself as if in thought. Realization strikes again as Shada abruptly understands what he's doing. Not much, actually. Mostly nothing. Like, standing. And talking. Pretty much what I've been doing already, standing and talking. Do you think this is a joke? Kurono barks. Just gonna keep doing what I'm already doing, the kid says gleefully. What? Distracting you? A shoe scrapes on the concrete, and the Shada reads the disturbance in the air. Kurono is lunging closer, away from the kid and toward Shada's body, knife raised. Suddenly the villain grunts, struggling against something. Let go, you stupid brat. Something long and flexible whips around him like a lasso and yanks, dragging him to the side. A knife blade strikes the spot where he was just lying, seconds before a nearby villain yelps in surprise. Shada can hear blows land, but he can't tell who's doing the hitting. More villains cry out, their voices traveling upward. Fakes, Mrs. Kiriyama, the boy calls out. Good timing. You're very welcome, Narita-kun. Shada is set down gently and released, the blindfold is snatched off, just in time to see Uraraka drop back and join Asui in standing over him. Kurono is the only villain left standing, 3 others are trapped on the ceiling, and the rest are lying in dazed heaps on the ground. He spares a moment to be peeved. His students just took down 5 villains in an enclosed space, and he missed it. Uraraka looks back at him. Are you okay, sensei? She asks. Over her shoulder, the arrow-shaped mutation on Kurono's head lashes out, heading straight for her. Shada can't even open his mouth to warn her. He strains to activate his quirk, but in his slowed-down state, it takes agonizingly long for the heat to build behind his eyes. The arrow never reaches her. The empty space between Kurono and Uraraka is suddenly occupied. A woman and a teenager seem to blink into existence, and instead of reaching Uraraka, the arrow hits the boy instead. Huh. The boy looks down at the spot where the arrow struck. His speed of movement is noticeably normal. That was a weird tickle. Kurono's eyes bulge. He strikes again and again, but the boy and woman are unfazed. The heat reaches its peak, his eyeballs itch, and Shada finally unleashes his quirk. He's on his feet the moment the arrow stops moving, his muscles screaming after being locked in place for so long. His student moves faster. Asu's tongue coils and twists around the now inert lock of mutated hair. She yanks down, and Kurono's head bounces off the concrete like a basketball. OOF. The boy hisses with sympathy. Shigeyamas aren't gonna be happy you stole their thunder. Asu doesn't answer him. She looks at him briefly, then turns to Uraraka with the beginnings of a 1,000-yard stare. He has a hole in his head, she says faintly. Yep, Uraraka says in a high voice. I can fit my whole finger in it, the boy says proudly. Wanna see? That won't be necessary, Asu croaks, turning green. Shouter lets the conversations watch over him as he finishes zip-tying the downed villains. They can be retrieved later. He doesn't know the boy. He knows the injury from crime scene photographs, a perfectly round puncture wound in the side of the head, deep enough to be instantly fatal. He never had the chance to meet the boy. He knew that already. But the woman he knows. He swam away with her son in his arms before he could watch her die. Now she stands before him, dripping wet as if she just crawled out of the bay that drowned her. She sees him staring and smiles, a little sadly. Let's leave that for later, shall we, she says. Where's Midoriya, he asks. Follow us. Nerida chimes in. We'll take you to them. I mean, it didn't look like he needed much help when we last saw him. He will, Kiriyama says. Let's hurry. Sensei. Asu looks from one face to the next, hopelessly lost. Ochiko, what's going on? Let's get to Deku first, Ochiko tells her. He can explain it best. But I did mean hurry, Kiriyama calls to them. There's not much time. That puts an end to questions. The cavern is unrecognizable. Every now and then, the ground ripples with violent change. Izuku hasn't seen Chisaki in quite some time, but he can see the results of his panic. The jagged landscape has been torn to shreds, and not all of it reformed. Concrete tosses and turns like the ocean in a storm, giving away each moment the ghosts let him touch the ground. It isn't much. They won't last forever, of course. Izuku can already feel it ebbing as One for All leaves its dozens of temporary vessels and returns to him. The ghosts are solid enough to touch, to hurt, but not quite strong enough to kill on their own. It's not for lack of trying. Screams ring out as the dead begin to wane, and Izuku blocks out the noise and keeps pressure on the terrible wound in Night Eye's stomach. One particularly violent ripple had freed him from the spike through his stomach, and on the one hand it left Izuku free to drag him to safety, but on the other, the blood flows faster without the spike holding it in. It's getting quieter, Night Eye says. Izuku can barely hear him. Not to me. You need to leave, Night Eye tells him. Take Eri, get out, before they all vanish. Can't, Izuku says. Who else is gonna plug this hole? Deku? No. That's an order, Night Eye rasps. Just think, Izuku replies. If you live through this, you can put it in my eval. Night Eye coughs, turning his head to split blood onto the broken concrete. Stubborn brat. I'm already dead. I think I know a dead person when I see one. As if on cue, the familiar prickle of watching eyes runs up his spine. He feels the ghost behind him before he hears them, before Night Eye's bleary eyes flicker past him, and well before the hero gasps out a warning. Without moving anything but his head, Izuku looks up to find Magna standing over him, sparks fading from her body. She holds her hand out to the side, the handgun loaded with permanent quirk erasers dangling idly from her fingers. Much as I'd like to stick around for my pound of flesh, she says. I have some people to talk to before I lose my chance. Something tells me you're not gonna give me another one. Izuku's eyes are fixed on the gun, and she smiles and tosses it away. It clatters to the ground no less than 10 meters away, well out of reach. Have fun. Without another word, she vanishes. You should stop her, Night Eye urges. She'll go straight to the League. No. If they find out about what you can do. No. His vision blurs with tears. But I can't move. Another ripple comes, quicker than the last. The edge of it nearly reaches them before it stops. If you don't leave me, Night Eye tells him, we'll both be dead. A scream rings out, high and clear and familiar enough to turn Izuku's head. Chisaki, breaking free of the remaining ghosts, bends the ground beneath him to fling himself toward A. The girl is on the ground, curled up and clutching her head as her horn continues to spark and glow. Rei crouches over her, unhinges her jaw and shrieks in defiance, but there aren't enough solid ghosts to hold Chisaki back anymore. They are all too far away to reach, and they won't come back for more power from Izuku. They are in a frenzy, they won't listen. Deku. Izuku chokes down a sob. One of Chisaki's ground-destroying ripples took down the barrier blocking off the rest of the tunnels, and standing in the jagged doorway is Uraraka. The cavern shakes, but she stays on her feet and reaches him at a dead run. She's not alone, Tsuyu is with her, and it should bother him that Tsuyu is there when a handful of ghosts are still visible, but there's just no room left in him to worry about it. I have to go, he says. Here, keep pressure on, I have to. Go, she tells him, slipping easily into his place. Hurry. We called for help, Tsuyu says faintly. And Aizawa's right behind us. Power ripples through him again. It's less than before, but still he pours it into every ghost he passes until he can feel himself scraping at the drakes. It won't last long, but it doesn't have to. Help is on the way. Every second he can buy is worthwhile. Chisaki disappears into the mob again, screaming as they claw at him. Izuku runs past him to where he huddles on the ground, horn blazing like a star. Rei is trying to tend to her, but nothing works. Eri's face is blank with terror. She looks like she's about to pass out. Arms catch Izuku around the middle, pulling him up short. He struggles, exhausted but still determined. Let me go, I have to. Don't, Eri's father tells him. Don't touch her, or you'll end up like me. Izuku goes still, frustrated. But I'll get her, the ghost says. She can't hurt me anymore. Rei bares her teeth at his approach, but moves aside when she realizes who it is. Eri's father gathers her up in his arms. As she realizes what is happening, or who is carrying her, she doesn't show it. The ghost takes a moment to hold her close, eyes shut as he touches his daughter for the first time in years. More of One for All slips away from the ghosts, and the moment is cut short when Chisaki breaks free again. Izuku pours his last drops of energy into the ghosts close enough to get in his way. The edges of his vision go dark, but he stays on his feet and follows Rei, Eri, and his silent father back to the others. They reach them just as Aizawa comes through the opening, limping on a leg that Narita warns him is broken. His teacher stops short and stares for a moment at the howling mob of the dead, the concrete floor and walls that come alive from time to time, and the pitiful group huddled at the edge of it all. A moment later, he joins them as well. Do I want to know, he asks over the noise. You erase quirks, don't you? Era's father asks, still cradling her gently. Please, something's wrong and she can't turn it off. She's burning up, I think it's hurting her. It's as simple as flipping a switch. The glow in Era's horn vanishes and it shrinks down to a tiny nod on her forehead. Her eyes slip shut and she goes limp in her father's arms. He quickly passes her to Izuku. Sorry. I think I'm fading, and I don't want to drop her. The sparks of One for All vanish as soon as the words are out. One by one the ghosts in the room lose their borrowed power, their solidity. They keep tearing at him until it becomes clear that they can no longer touch him. The fight is going to continue. They have a better chance with Aizawa here, but his leg is broken. Izuku wants desperately to get up, but the strength has gone from his legs and the tunnel vision won't go away. One for All is back in its proper vessel, but his energy is just gone. When it all dies down, Chisaki is kneeling in the middle of the crowd, shoulders heaving as he breathes. His jacket is gone, torn from his body along with the mask, which now lies discarded and out of reach. His face is scratched and gouged, blood drips from his nose and mouth, and one eye keeps squinting and shutting. His throat is dark with bruises, all in the shape of grasping hands and fingers. But he's still alive, still awake, still looking at them with murder in his eyes. Izuku strains to get up, but a hand lands heavy on his shoulder. Don't get up, Midoriya-chan, Tsuyu tells him. Help is coming, and if it comes to it, we can fight him instead. Izuku swallows the lump in his throat. It's part relief and part guilt for feeling relieved. He shouldn't want to make someone fight for him, especially if they can't afford to. Uraraka is busy with Night Eye. Even if she weren't, she and Tsuyu are contact fighters, and there's no worse way to fight against Chisaki. But there's no other way, because Aizawa can barely walk and Izuku has nothing left to give the ghosts. He's so tired. Chisaki climbs to his feet. There's no smugness left, no more calm, easy arrogance and certainty of victory. All that's left is base rage. He lunges toward them, slamming his hand to a concrete ridge. Aizawa's eyes flash red, and nothing happens. Chisaki ducks behind the ridge, out of Aizawa's line of sight. In an instant, a wave of concrete spikes ripples toward them. There's a blur of red and gold, shooting past them with the sound of a cake snapping, before it vanishes into the ground. The pillar hiding Chisaki shatters, and the wave of spikes halts close enough for Izuku to reach out and touch the tip of one. Chisaki goes flying out from behind his cover, doubled up and choking from a blow to the stomach. Tagada stands between him and the rest of them, and chances a look over his shoulder. His face is a mask of cold fury. Izuku has never seen him look like that before. Is everyone all right? His voice doesn't shake. He is definitely eerily calm. Izuku is tired. Era weighs far too little for a girl her age, but even she feels heavy to him now. Everything hurts. His face feels sticky and crusty with blood or tears or both. He doesn't even have the energy to lie. No, his voice breaks. Tagada's eyes burn with anger before he turns back to the villain, and in spite of the festering guilt and helplessness stirring in his gut, Izuku swallows a sob of relief. Someone else is fighting now. He doesn't have to get up anymore. It's the single most vicious fight that Izuku has ever witnessed. Tagada sends a bone-shattering punch into Chisaki's jaw, and Chisaki's lethal hands pass through him again and again. It's almost laughable how little the villain can do against him. Except, Tagada is fast and skilled, avoiding death every time Chisaki reaches for him, but Chisaki only needs to get lucky once. At their feet, dark metal glints in the scant light of the cavern. Tagada! Izuku yells after he sends Chisaki flying back with a kick. Tagada looks. Izuku raises one leaden arm and spells out a message with his hand. In that moment of distraction, the villain doesn't try to kill him again. His eyes fall upon Izuku, with Air limp and unconscious in his arms, and he makes one last break for them. Concrete obstacles part to make way for him, and he reaches out with wild, hungry eyes. Aizawa's eyes glow red, and Chisaki's hand is harmless by the time his fingertips reach Izuku's face. A shot rings out, and the villain goes rigid. He turns and finds Tagada staring down the barrel of the handgun, as steady as a statue. Tagada squeezes the trigger again and again, over and over until it clicks emptily in his hand, and every drop of Chisaki's own final weapon is coursing through his body. Tsuyu's tongue wraps around Chisaki's neck and pulls him to the ground, and when Chisaki puts up a fight, she leaps on top of him and knocks him cold with a vicious punch to the base of his skull. In the silence that follows, Izuku can hear the distant rumble of footsteps. Friendlies are on the way, a ghost says helpfully. Oh, good, Izuku whispers. Can somebody take air? Aizawa is helping Tsuyu secure Chisaki. Uraraka is busy tending to Night Eye. Tagada drops the handgun. For a moment he pauses, eyes fixed on Night Eye as sickening fear creeps over his face. But the moment passes and he kneels to take air from him. I've got her. Good, Izuku says. Because I'm about to. He knows nothing more. Chapter 59. Hikishi Kenji, otherwise known as the villain Magna, hurries through the dark subway tunnels in search of her old comrades. The tunnels are dark. When Overhaul's lackey took control of them, he knocked out a lot of the lighting on top of screwing with the layout. The dark doesn't matter to her as much as it did when she was alive, but she's still flying blind. That's fine, though. As long as she keeps going up, she'll find them. She can dodge heroes easily enough, and she knows where the League's rendezvous point is. Her time is running short, with the hero brats with power on its way out, but she can make it. She can tell them this wonderful, vital bit of information about the kid Shigaraki was fixated on. They took him once and they can take him again. Take the kid, take the girl, and they'll be back in business. They'll have to strike fast while the Midoriya kid is still soft and tender and limping. No matter how many friends he has, those other dead idiots can't stop living villains from taking him back. And Magna's smarter than that chooser bitch. She can make sure there's no funny bullshit going on among the dead. The rendezvous point is close, tapped away in some side tunnels that the heroes aren't using. Magna puts on an extra burst of speed, reveling in the buzz of power. This is the closest to alive she's felt since Overhaul killed her. And just think, once they have the kid and apply a little pressure in the right place, she'll be doing this all the time. It'll be like she never died at all. She hears Shigaraki's voice in the distance, echoing in the tunnels as he bitches about something. Business as usual, and once Magna's done her thing, he'll be happy as a kid on New Year's. She opens her mouth to call out to him. Hopefully this won't spook him too bad. And if it does, hopefully the news she's about to deliver will make up for it. Before she can speak, hands close around her throat, mercilessly tight. Magna doesn't need to breathe, but the sensation is still a shock. The grip around her neck squeezes with what would be bruising force if she had any flesh to bruise. She's yanked back off her feet, away from where she knows Shigaraki is. When she fights back, more pairs of hands latch on until she can't move. One clamps over her mouth, gagging her more effectively than the grip on her throat. They drag her, struggling and twisting like a snake, until she's too far away to call out. Her form scrambles with panic, but somehow, impossibly, they hold her. And then she's on the ground. And she is no longer alone. There are people around her, ghosts like her, but not like her, because she can feel the rage and misery rolling off of them in waves. She stares up at them, first in fear and then in confusion, because she doesn't know them at first. Their faces are unfamiliar at first. They don't look like anyone she knew when she was alive. They barely even look like any other ghosts she's ever seen. Some of them stand under their own power. Others fuse and meld with the ones closest to them, flickering between one being and several. The only thing they have in common is their eyes, black, not white. It's not until the smallest one steps forward that she realizes what she's looking at. Ragged leathery wings dragged and hang uselessly from the boy's shoulders. His eyes weak with black ooze. When he opens his mouth, his voice rattles her to her core. You were gonna snitch on Deku, weren't you? She doesn't need to breathe. But she wants to, just so she can hyperventilate. I didn't do anything to you, she stammers out. You were already like this, before I ever came, and I didn't even know. The boy steps closer, with all the others hovering close around them. Magna presses herself back as far as she can. He helped me, the boy says. He helped all of us. All of us, a black-eyed woman echoes, her voice wispy and far away. I did bad things, the boy says, hoarse and mournful. I heard him, and he still helped. I didn't even remember my name, till he called me. The rattle in his voice contorts into something that shakes the very particles of thought and memory that make her up. He helped you. And you were gonna rat him out. I wasn't. Magna lies and flinches when the sound of rattling spreads to the other black-eyed ghosts. The rest of her borrowed power trickles out, leaving her an empty ghost once more. I want. I can't. See? Power's gone. Can't tell them anything. Good. The boy with wings steps closer again. And you're not gonna try again. Right? The streaks of black drip down to his chin. You know what's gonna happen if you do. Right? Yes. Fuck. I get it, I get it. Magna nods. Fine. Won't tell Anne. Won't try. Just don't touch me. Wasn't gonna touch you. The boy smirks like a bully. But we are watching you. Watching you. Don't forget. He helped us. In the blink of an eye, the tunnel is empty. The ghosts and their black, staring eyes are gone. She's alone. Magna lets herself fall apart, just for a little bit. When Night Eye was still a rookie hero, young and raw with the ink still wet on his diploma, he once delivered an injured and delirious civilian to the paramedics. She was older than him back then, but no impossibly young in his memory, barely 30 and already shattered at the spine and bleeding to death. The last he remembers of her is how she looked him in the eye as the medics lifted her into the waiting ambulance and said, in the calmest voice he ever heard, "If they put me under, I'm not gonna wake up." And she was right, she died in the hospital 20 minutes later. Morbid curiosity and persistent nightmares led him to check the quirk registry for her name. She had heat-resistant skin, nothing to do with any sort of clairvoyance. That was intuition alone and nothing to do with quirks. Now, as he lies in a hospital bed, stares at the ceiling, and tries not to look at or think about the tubes and wires protruding from the hole in his numbed midsection, he understands. Sometimes the body just knows. There's no pain, at least. A ventilator is keeping him breathing, and he feels nothing below the sternum, but he doesn't hurt. If he keeps staring at the blurry fluorescent lights above him, he can pretend that's because there's nothing wrong. He feels no worse than he ever has at his most overworked, half giddy with exhaustion and fighting to keep his eyelids from slipping shut. God, he's tired. They wouldn't even have to put him under, not when it feels as if he hasn't slept easy since. Night Eye gives up forcing his mind to finish the sentence and continues the laborious task of lifting his eyelids every time they close to blink. When he hears quick footsteps through the door to his room, he doesn't even bother turning his head. The nurses can do as they like to keep an eye on him and keep him comfortable. No one has said a thing to him, but he knows. He cannot use his quirk on himself, but he knows. The footsteps pause at the doorway, then enter at a slower pace. Night Eye allows himself another risky blink, wondering why this particular nurse is being so hesitant. Maybe they are new and they haven't seen anything this bad yet. He doesn't expect the touch to his hand, but he doesn't even have the energy to jump. It's enough of a struggle just to turn his head and squint until the blur above him settles into something more recognizable. A quiet sigh reaches his ears, deep and heavy with sorrow. Oh, Mirai. His next blink is a little less work. That you, Toshi? He barely recognizes his own voice. I'm here, Toshinori says. Ah, good, he says. I wasn't sure. Can't see a thing. Toshinori gives a raspy chuckle. Sorry about that, he replies. I'll ask after your glasses if you want. Millimeter. Later. His hand twitches, fingers uncurling and reaching. I don't mind. His knuckle brushes the other hand, and after a moment's hesitation, it settles on top of his. How are you feeling? Toshinori asks. He takes another breath through the oxygen mask. Tired. Ah. Toshinori's hand starts to slip away. I can come back if you want to rest. He's not sure where the strength comes from, but he catches hold of Toshinori's hand before it leaves, holding as tight as his limp fingers will allow. Don't. Toshinori's shake goes still. Mirai. I'm not done, Night Eye says. Not yet. If I fall asleep, I won't wake up. He hears the sharp intake of breath, even though Toshinori tries to muffle it. His old friend is still as a statue above him, a blur of bright yellow in the hospital lights. You can't know that, Toshinori tells him quietly. Can. I can see the future. Truly, a pathetic attempt at a jerk. Barely even a quip. But it's the best he can do at the moment. Not your own, Toshinori says. Night Eye smiles, or tries at least. He wonders what it must look like. Tables have turned, he says. Now. I'm ready, and you're the one who isn't. His friend is silent for a moment, and occurs to him that his words were a little crueler than he meant them to be. He takes a breath to speak again, but Toshinori beats him to it. Are you, he asked softly. Are you really all right with this? He thinks of the work he still has left to do. He thinks of the sidekicks under him, the mess he'll leave behind for them to clean up. He thinks of Midoriya, who's come so far since they met and still has so much further to grow. He thinks of Midoriya, still young and raw and exploding with potential. He thinks of Toshinori and the past 6 years gone to waste. A lump forms in his throat, making it hard to breathe even with the mask. No, he admits. Toshinori squeezes his hand. His breathing sounds funny. You know, for what it's worth, I wasn't either, he says. I was frustrated. And afraid. Because I lost so much, and I gave up so much, and I always thought I'd have to give up everything in the end, and finding out that I was right, it just seemed unfair. Of course it was unfair, Night Eye starts. But I didn't want to feel that way, so I told myself I didn't, and I told you I didn't, and his voice breaks. I pushed you away on purpose because you were one of the things reminding me why I didn't want to die. I shut you out because when you weren't there, when you weren't close to me, I could pretend I was all right, and I could pretend I had nothing to lose, nothing to leave behind, and I'm sorry, Mirai. His eyes burn. The blur of light and color swims until he blinks, and the tears spill down to his temples. Toshinori's breath rasps horribly. I'm so sorry. He doesn't have much in the way of grip strength, but he squeezes Toshinori's hand with all he is left. I gave up, he says, wishing he could see properly. As soon as things stopped going the way I wanted, I said everything wrong, and when you fought me on it, I gave up. Didn't even try to stay. Another quavering breath leaves his friend, and the hand holding him shakes. Damn, Toshinori breathes out. We wasted so much time. Night Eye blinks away the witness in his eyes. How's your boy? Izuku's all right, Toshinori says. He's not hurt, just hasn't woken up yet. He's exhausted. In spite of himself, Night Eye smiles. Not surprised. Toshinori's thumb swipes over his knuckles. How'd he do? I was wrong, Toshi, Night Eye admits. You do know how to pick them. Toshinori laughs softly. And everyone else? Was anyone else injured? Or? A few injuries is the reply. But no fatalities. Snatch, you know, the send hero. He had a close call, but is fine. Rocklock is recovering in the hospital. All other injuries are minor, including Yamtagada's. Nothing, a few healing quirks and bed rest when fix. Another slow blink. They're getting slower. One. What? One fatality, he says. Could have been worse. Toshinori's hand shakes. Mirai. Please. Giving up on me is one thing. Please don't give up on yourself, not after all this. Before Night Eye can answer, there's a commotion out in the hallway. Voices he doesn't recognize call out for someone to slow down, stop running. An apology is shouted back in a voice that he does. Running footsteps skid to a halt outside the door, and Night Eye suppresses a sigh. Deep down, he was hoping to be gone before Mirio had to see him like this. Sir. Mirio stops short at the door. Night Eye can hear him breathing hard, as if he just sprinted through the hospital. That's not good, he was injured and should be resting, healing quirk or no healing quirk. It's not true, is it? Mirio's voice cracks. Eraser had told me, he told me you were. He enters slowly, with hesitant steps. Please tell me he was wrong. Toshinori takes a breath. Well, we can't know whether. Don't, Night Eye rasps. He squeezes Toshi's hand for all he's worth, a silent plea for silence. Mirai, Toshi says in a plea of his own. Now's not the time, Night Eye murmurs. Don't be cruel. Toshi's hand shudders in his grip. A second patch of gold joins the first, to his dismay. The last thing he wants is for Mirio to watch him die, but he can't find the words to tell him to leave. He doubts the boy would listen anyway. Sir, he can barely see how Mirio stands with his hands braced on the railing, leaning toward him as if he wants to reach out but can't. Sir, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What an odd thing to say. From what little Night Eye has been told and what little he can remember, it was Mirio who brought down Chisaki in the end, though one of Yuki's in turns dealt the final blow. Whatever for. Mirio's voice breaks. I should have been there, I should have been fighting with you. I should have been there to help, and I wasn't, I was so slow. Odd, Night Eye murmurs. I seem to remember you arriving right when you were needed. I didn't. I wasn't there until the end, when it was already too late, and if I'd just been faster, if I'd been there, then Midoriya wouldn't be hurt and you wouldn't be. Mirio. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't fast enough. You fought so well, Mirio. I couldn't be prouder. Mirio sobs, a broken, pitiful sound that sends cracks into Night Eye's heart. I'm sorry, too. I wanted to see what you would become. With my own eyes. Living eyes, he thinks. He will see it happen either way, but it isn't the same if it isn't a future that he can reach out and touch. I don't know if I can. Not without you. It's getting harder to breathe, he realizes. Not that the mask has stopped working. But breathing takes energy and is slowly running out. Now, what did I tell you about selling yourself short? With the last of his fading strength, he lifts his free hand and feels his way to Midoriya's face. His protege starts at the touch before leaning into it as he tries and fails to swallow another sob. Night Eye feels Midoriya's test-tricked face in one hand and Toshinori's hand in the other. He has two choices before him. Something tells him he only has time for one. He makes his choice and the future stretches before him, moment by moment. It is bright. It is beautiful. And then it is gone. It hits him all at once, that is to say, nothing. It's a strange thing to feel nothing. Or perhaps it isn't strange because it isn't anything at all. That's sort of the point. And then, a split second before he's almost gotten used to nothing, everything returns to him, blinding and raw and all-consuming. Frustration. Sorrow. He doesn't want to die here, not when there's still more he wants to do. He's only just reunited and reconciled with Toshinori, only to die and leave him again. There's still more he wants to teach Midoriya. For once in his life, he wants to see the future play out. As if in answer, his vision returns, only it's not what it was before. The blurry haze is gone, and the world unfolds before him an impossibly sharp focus. He's not lying down and looking up anymore. He's standing up on his own 2 feet, looking at Toshinori's hunched back as his friend leans over his hospital bed. Across from him, Midoriya crumples like a puppet with its strings cut, sobbing. Pain spreads through him the way the heart beats blood through the veins. This is wrong, he thinks. They aren't supposed to look like this, small and helpless in the face of loss. He knows them both, he knows how strong they are, and the world goes hazy as the ragged shreds of his mind scream in protest. Then it settles in sharp, unforgiving clarity, and he knows, he understands. This is his fault. They are in pain because of him, because he wasn't strong enough, because he couldn't do something so simple as live for their sakes, and he should fix this. He should comfort them. If he could just reach forward. If he could tell them that it's all right, that he's here, he hasn't gone anywhere, then maybe. Maybe the world won't fall to pieces right when he's just gotten it back. He reaches out to them desperately, knowing in the midst of wild, mad hope that no matter how hard he tries, he won't be able to touch them. A pair of hands catch hold of him, holding him back. The anguish that makes him up churns violently, anger and frustration leaking in. How dare anyone stop him? How dare anyone try to hold him back? Not yet, comes the whisper, and the grip on his wrist gentles but does not vanish altogether. He rounds on the voice, and his eyes fall upon Midoriya Izuku's face. Not yet, Midoriya repeats, eyes blank white and unblinking. Let them be. Let them cry. Confusion feels sharper now than it ever has before, and it bleeds into panic far too easily. What are you doing here, he asks. Why, you can't be dead. You're not supposed to be. It seems as if he blinks and the room with his friend, his protege, and his empty body are gone. They are standing in a different room now, quieter than before, and Night Eye looks to the bed and finds a small, plump woman curled over a hospital bed, holding a still, silent Midoriya Izuku's hand. As he watches, the blanket slowly rises and falls. I'm not dead, the Midoriya still holding his wrist says. His voice is odd, strangely soft and indistinct, as if he's not completely there. This part woke up before the rest of me did. Oh, Night Eye says softly. I'll be all right, Midoriya tells him. Just worry about yourself. The boy vanishes from his side, but before Night Eye can panic at the sudden solitude, an unsettles over his shoulder, more heavy and solid than he currently feels. Come on, an unfamiliar voice says briskly, and he glances over to find the ghost of a sturdy dark-haired woman quirking a sad smile at him. Might as well say hello to the others. Shada is long accustomed to hospital rooms. He's been injured before. He's been helpless before. He's even been captured before, on more than one occasion. Every time he suffers and survives, he is reminded of how many heroes have died in those situations and how lucky he supposedly is not to be one of them. He never feels lucky. He only ever feels tired and resigned. When he walks into Midoriya's room and finds the boy's mother holding his hand, whispering to him without any hope for a response, there is nothing he wouldn't give for the power to turn back time so he can give the past few days another try. It's not the first time he's felt that way, it's not the first time he's had to be the bearer of terrible news, and it won't be the last. The doctors say he's as healthy as can be. Midoriya Izuku's voice pulls Shouder out of his troubled thoughts. She keeps her eyes on her son as she speaks to him. A few bumps and scrapes, but no injuries besides that. He's not even unconscious, just asleep. They were wondering if he was under some kind of quirk, that's how deep it is. Shouder nods, then bows to her. I'm sorry that I did so poorly in protecting him. You don't need to apologize, she replies, her tone deceptively light. I've been scared out of my mind since I heard about this mission of his. He's come out of it with scratches and not a single broken bone. He'll wake up soon. He'll be all right. She heaves a sigh. The worst thing that's going to hurt him from this is that someone else died. And that's not something you could ever have protected him from. Shouder disagrees, but says nothing. When she finally looks over her shoulder at him, her face is heavy with exhaustion. I'll tell him you came by when he wakes up. Shouder inclines his head to her and leaves the room in search of his other students. He finds them all in one place. Someone must have set aside a quiet spot for the student heroes, or they were simply lucky enough to find the little waiting room, out of the way and empty. Kirishima and Asua sit on either side of Uraraka, who stares down in silence at her own hands. Kirishima's arm is around her, and Asui's hand rests palm up in Uraraka's lap, a silent offer of comfort. For his part, Shouder is not ignorant to Uraraka's humble ambitions. She has no grand dreams of glory, only the simple desire to support herself and give her family comfort and stability. There are very few bad reasons to save lives, and in Shouder's eyes, that is not one of them. He has never subscribed to the opinions of Stain and his ilk that heroes should somehow rise above their physical needs. Saving lives has been a career since long before quirks evolved. Take that away, and you'd have to toss out the entire medical field along with it. But there comes a point when a career path becomes more than just a paycheck, and Shouder can tell by looking at the three faces before him that they are coming to truly understand just how high the stakes are for heroes. But now isn't the time to talk about that. Kirishima is the first to speak. Is Midoriya okay? He's fine, Shouder replies and sees the tension leave the trio all at once. Exhausted, but uninjured. But Sir Night Eye isn't, Uraraka murmurs. She hasn't taken her eyes off her hands. They're clean of blood now, but Shouder knows from experience that she'll be seeing the stains for a while. No, Shouder says quietly. The doctors did what they could, but he succumbed to his injuries. Uraraka doesn't answer, and he kneels down to her eye level. That's not on you. You know that, right? Her mouth tightens into a stubborn line. In missions like this, you can't bear the weight of every mistake, he goes on, looking at all three of them in turn. And sometimes there are no mistakes. Every hero can do everything right, and things can still go wrong. That's not a burden for any one hero to carry. Tears trickle down Uraraka's face, and she quickly wipes them away. That's one of the hardest lessons a hero must learn, Shouder says. You can't save everyone. I want to, Uraraka says. I want to save people, I want to save as many as I can. And you will. You have. Shouder focuses on the girls for a moment. Don't forget, you saved at least one life today. He's not just saying it to make them feel better. If the girls hadn't intervened when they did, then he would probably be dead. And Eri, too, Kirishima adds. Eri, too. I'm going to do better next time, Uraraka says. She doesn't speak it like a vow or a hope. She states it like a fact. I know, Shouder says. I believe you, Uraraka. Throughout it all, Asua says nothing. She's barely taken her eyes off of him since he walked in. There are questions burning in her unblinking stare, a reminder of what she's seen. Shouder lifts an eyebrow at her, and she lowers her eyes. She can wait for explanations, it seems. And now later finds him in a hospital restroom, trying not to zone out as he washes his hands. He stares at his own reflection and marvels at the lack of new scars. He hasn't gained any since the USJ, all of his injuries since then have been minor. He does look tired, but there are no new marks to grimly admire in his reflection. Without warning, the temperature drops and Shouder's breath leaves a patch as it ghosts over the mirror. Before Shouder can wonder what happened, an invisible finger traces letters on the fogged glass. He's awake. Suppressing a shudder, Shouder leaves the restroom behind and hurries back to Midoriya's room. Sure enough, he walks in to find Midoriya half hidden in his mother's embrace, eyes open and looking around the room. They fall upon Shouder and the boy freezes. His mother pulls back to follow his gaze. In the doorway, Shouder balks for a moment. Night Eye's death sits in the back of his throat, heavy and inevitable. Before him, Midoriya still looks exhausted, eyes unfocused behind dripping lids. It's only by virtue of the angle of the pillars behind him that he's sitting half upright at all. It's okay, Midoriya tells him in sluggish sign. I already know. Relief mingles with dismay. He doesn't have to be the bearer of bad news, but only because Midoriya is already carrying it. Words escape him. He's comforted people about death before, civilians and fellow heroes alike, but never anyone like Midoriya. With Midoriya, there's a possibility that Night Eye is still here, and Shouder doesn't even know how to ask. His students' eyes stay on him for a while, and Shouder can see the gears grinding through the heavy exhaustion. After a moment, Midoriya shifts over and taps his mother's arm. His next signs are quicker, indistinct, more garbled for lack of a better word, and Shouder only picks out enough to know that Midoriya wants to say something to Shouder, but not her. A quick discussion follows, half in whispers and half in sign, before she finally kisses her son on the forehead and gets up from the chair. I'll be out in the hallway, she tells Shouder, and leaves the room. I'm not going to interrogate you right now, Shouder tells him. There's time for that later. It can wait until you're ready. Midoriya shakes his head. He reaches for the table beside his bed, where a notepad and pen have been left for him. His mother must have requested them, just in case. She knows her son well. His handwriting is just as wobbly as Shouder would expect. The conversation progresses slowly, but he is patient. I don't want my mom to know this yet. This, of course, raises a few alarms. I won't keep secrets from your mother where your safety is concerned, he says bluntly. Midoriya shakes his head again. No. I'll tell her myself. But not yet. Tell her what? Shouder asks, and no amount of bracing can prepare him for what Midoriya writes next. I died. Error brought me back. The shock doesn't wear off. It can't wear off, not for something like that. All Shouder can do is adjust to it. When you say died. The pen in Midoriya's hand digs into the paper, scratching through a few pages. The knuckles gripping it are white. I was dead. Chisaki killed me. Eri used her quirk. Shouder feels panic growing in the distance, alongside many other things, terror, anger, overprotective fury. He wants to take the boy by his shoulders and shake him, to demand to know what the hell he thought he was doing, getting killed on what should have been Shouder's watch. He wants to be angry with him for being reckless enough to be in that position in the first place. He takes a deep breath and pushes all of that away. At best, doing any of those things will make him look irrational. At worst, they will teach Midoriya to stay silent the next time something terrible happens to him. Looking at the boy now, with his head hanging so that his hair hides his eyes from view, Shouder can see that there is nothing he can scold him with that Midoriya doesn't already know. I'm glad you're telling me, he says after a moment. It's a gross understatement. There were 3 people down in that cavern with Midoriya when most of this went down. One is dead, one is a small child, and one is a semi-comatose villain set to be carted off to Tartarus. Midoriya could have kept something like this to himself and no one would have been the wiser. Eri's quirk was not a sure thing. It could have failed outright, or it could have worked far too well. Shouder could have hobbled into that cavern and found his student gone, one way or another. His hand settles on Midoriya's shoulder. It's just as much for his own comfort as it is for Midoriya's, a reminder that he is still alive and solid and real. I'm sorry that I wasn't there to help you. The shoulder spasms beneath his hand. Midoriya tucks his chin in. There are no tears. It's Kirishima who sends out the first text, announcing both the end of their mission and the fact that all 4 of them emerged nearly unscathed. Word reaches the Class 1A dormitory and sweeps through the crowded common room like a sigh of relief. Tenya doesn't realize he's been holding his breath until the news reaches his ears and he lets it out at last. Then come whispers of a fatality, not one of their classmates but one of the supervising heroes, and Tenya finds himself catching Todoroki's eye from across the room. Not a single member of the class is upstairs. No one has left the common room since news first reached them. Kuda is passing his rabbit around, keeping nerves settled. Asui sends out the next text, letting them know that all four of them will be arriving soon, and the nervous atmosphere turns to relief and excitement. After spending all day sitting in radio silence, everyone is eager for news. Remember, everyone. Tenya calls out. Don't crowd them when they arrive. Give them space, and if they don't wish to talk, then don't press them. By the time the front door opens, Mika is in Tenya's lap. In spite of his own reminder, he can't help scooping her up and rushing to his feet. The rest of the class almost crowd them anyway, but Yawa Rosa plants herself at a distance and gives stern sidelong glances to anyone who looks ready to rush them. It works, and there's a healthy distance when the four of them walk in. For a moment, the entrance hall is silent. Tenya looks over his classmates, takes in a few bandages and minor scratches and bruises. True to Kirishima's word, they all seem to have come out of it more or less unscathed. And then Tenya looks at their faces and knows that isn't the case. For his part, Kirishima simply looks lost. He's smiling as he lifts his hand and calls out a greeting, but it's shaky and uncertain, especially when he glances back at the others. Uraraka's eyes are red and puffy but dry, and her mouth is perfectly straight and tight on her face until she forces it into a smile. Asui's face is carefully blank. Tenya hasn't seen this look on her since after the Camino incident, when she was trying to pretend everything was all right. And Midoriya? Midoriya pauses in the entranceway, takes in the barely held-back crowd, and immediately backs away until the other three are in front of him. They let him without much fuss, with Uraraka shooting him a worried look over her shoulder. There's some milling around before Ashida breaks through and throws her arms around Kirishima. "Hey guys," she says. "I'm glad you all made it back okay. It's good to be back." Kirishima answers and the tension breaks. Everyone converges on each other, cautiously at first, before caution is thrown aside in favor of camaraderie. Except Tenya notes Midoriya edging around the outskirts, unnoticed. If Tenya hadn't been looking for him specifically, he might have missed him as well. Apparently he isn't the only one, because Todoroki catches up to him first. "Midoriya." Tenya keeps his voice down as he approaches. It's clear Midoriya doesn't want that much attention. His friend looks tired. That's all Tenya can think of to describe it. He looks more tired than he's ever looked before in his life. He signs, and Tenya is still learning, but he can recognize her want to be alone right now. Without another word, Tenya holds out his cat. Midoriya purses his lips. It's not a smile, it's barely even an attempt, and takes her. Todoroki doesn't say anything, just presses his shoulder briefly before letting him slip away. "Might be best to leave him alone for now," Tenya murmurs. Todoroki nods once, then slips back to the others. By the time Midoriya creeps back down and takes a place on one of the dorm couches, they've been told enough to know not to inundate him with questions. Within minutes, there's a cup of tea in his hands, Kirishima is leaning comfortably against him, and all topics of conversation are strictly school and pop culture related. Midoriya relaxes, and that's all anyone can ask of him. Late at night, Shadow sits up and reads by phone light. He's resigned to being awake, resigned to the noise in his head that won't let up. Remedial training. Lessons to learn. His friends and classmates doing real hero work while he's still chasing, lagging, catching up, all while Endeavor looks on from the top and threatens to oversee his training in person. As if he doesn't have enough to keep him up at night. And now his best friend, his closest friend, his whatever they're supposed to be called is, what, troubled? Devastated. It's impossible to say, thanks in no small part to the fact that Shadow can't share in it, because he's still so far behind. So now he's awake, mostly because he can't sleep, but also because he's fully ready for a knock at his door. A few minutes before midnight, it comes. Shadow sets aside his book and his phone and goes to let Midoriya in. "Can't sleep either?" he asks, once they're settled on his futon, sitting on it, not lying down to sleep. Midoriya releases Mika and lets her wonder. "I want to be alone right now," he says. "But I don't think I should be alone." That's a feeling he can definitely understand. "You don't have to say anything about it," he says. "The others filled us in on what happened. Uraraka filled us in on the other stuff." Midoriya nods. "I just don't know what everyone will say about it," he says. Anyone who knows anything about heroics will understand, Shadow answers. You don't know that. Shadow hesitates. I know that heroes make hard choices every day, he says. And I also know you tend to make the right ones. He doesn't know if that's comforting or not. It gets a thoughtful frown and not much else. Hey, Midoriya, he says. I thought I said you could call me Izuku. He rolls his eyes. It's not like you ever call me Shadow. Midoriya Izuku stares at him, surprised. Then, he spells out Shadow's name, one character at a time. Glad we are in agreement, Shadow says, and Izuku sort of smiles. It's not quite a smile. But he'll take it. And next time he's going to be there, so no matter what happens, he will understand. So anyway, Ochako finishes. Ghosts. Ghosts, Tsuyu agrees, sitting back. Her head tilts back until she's looking at the ceiling. This is a lot. Ochako remembers how her revelation treated her easily since she just recounted it to Tsuyu, along with the rest of what she knows. She and Ida have Deku's blessing to explain things to Tsuyu, but it still feels strange and wrong to discuss his quirk without him. If you need time to process all of this new information, please let us know, Ida says. And please don't feel bad for doing so. I know from experience just how overwhelming it can be. Of course, Tsuyu says with a soft croak. But I think I'm all right. You're right, it is overwhelming, but it explains some things that I've always wondered about. That helps. And we do apologize for keeping secrets from you, Ida says. No we don't, Ochako cuts him off and ignores the sharp look he sends her. This is Deku's quirk and Deku's secret, and I'm not sorry that I didn't blab about it to anyone. Even you, Tsuyu. No, you're right, Tsuyu assures her. I understand that more than anything else. I understand a lot of things. She taps her fingertip against her mouth thoughtfully. The only question I have left is his second quirk. Second quirk. Ida echoes. His strength, of course, Tsuyu says, rib-biting again. The green lightning. Where did that come from? Ochako shrugs. I just assumed he was channeling the power of the dead or something. The ghost we saw in the tunnels had green sparks too, remember? Millimeter, maybe. Tsuyu frowns. I suppose that's as good an explanation as any, since none of us know much about ghosts beyond what Midoriya has told you. I trust him, Ida says firmly. If there's something that we need to know, then I trust that he'll tell us. If he doesn't, then I don't believe there's anything to be gained by prying. Weren't you just trying to apologize for helping him keep a secret? Ochako points out. Her friend splutters for a moment. Midoriya's discretion concerning secrets is not the same as mine, he says. While I am not personally comfortable with withholding information, I can understand that his situation is different from anything that I have personally experienced. You're a good friend, Ida, Tsuyu assures him, and Ida splutters again, suitably pleased. I do my best, he says. Especially in times as trying as these. Ochako hums in agreement. It's been the better part of a week since their internships ended, and they are all finally settling down. Deku still isn't speaking, and everyone's been trying to be helpful, whether it's by keeping him company or keeping him occupied. Even Bakugo, in his own way, is trying to be helpful, if only by staying away from him. He's been spending most of his time with Kirishima, which Ochako is glad of. Kirishima's the only one who didn't make it to the deepest chamber of the base. She's pretty sure has been feeling left out, even if it means he missed out on something unpleasant. She can understand that feeling, too. Tsuyu goes back to staring up at the ceiling. Still, it's hard to imagine. That much power in one person. He's always been strong, Ida points out. Not just that, Tsuyu says. I mean, just think. He has a strength, but he also has this invisible army that no one can see but him. They can be anywhere, and most people don't even know they're there. It's the perfect quirk for surveillance, and in a pinch he can make them a physical threat as well. He's not just powerful, he's powerful in two different ways. Yeah, Ochako says softly. All of that, Tsuyu goes on, and it still wasn't enough to beat Overhaul on his own. Hey, Ochako says. That's hardly fair, says Ida. We are all first years and this was his first internship. No matter how powerful he may be. You remember what Aizawa-sensei told us, Ochiko adds. It's impossible for a hero to save everyone, especially by themselves. I know. Tsuyu blurts out, sitting up to shake her head furiously. Sorry. That came out wrong. Of course it was his first, our first. That's what I mean. It's just we've been thrown into the deep end since we started. First the USJ, then the summer camp, and now this. Even Todoroki and Bakugo, two of the strongest people in class, didn't get their licenses. Even Midoriya, who's even stronger, even he was overwhelmed. She sighs. Sometimes it still feels like we've barely even started. It's a heavy bundle of thoughts to consider all at once. They are all so busy considering it that none of them notice the object of conversation listening at the doorway before silently backing away. On the outside, the kid's doing a little better. Beyond that, it's anyone's guess. If Izuku's talking to anyone, Nana isn't one of them. But that's okay. She can understand that, because this might be the first time someone that he knows has died. She remembers watching Tashi spiral in grief after she died. Tashi's only doing a little better than he was back then, and Izuku, well. She thinks, she hopes, that he's doing okay. He's not isolating himself in his grief. He's not falling into any harmful coping mechanisms. Quite the opposite, really. Where is he going now? Ah, that brings her to the main project on her hands. At the moment they are on a train, heading into town. Izuku's in a different car, bent over a piece of paper while a ghostly old woman dictates a note for Hen. Nana doesn't need to watch over him personally, not when he's accompanied by two of his living friends plus a Razorhead. Don't know, Nana replies and can't help grinning at the mystified look on Night Eye's face. The where's not really important. You'll see what I mean. They get off near a residential area. Nana follows at a distance, smiling to herself. The kiddo's hemmed in with Uraraka on one side and Todoroki on the other, and Ray orbiting them all like a Mern. A Razorhead follows at a closer distance, keeping a watchful eye on his kids as the old woman's ghost leads them through the neighborhood. Maybe he's feeling better, maybe he isn't. If not, at least he's in a place where he can, eventually. He's surrounded by people who will help him every step of the way. I still don't quite understand, Night Eye says as the little group enters a cul-de-sac. Then Sprout's taking a self-care day, Nana explains, and Night Eye looks no less befuddled. The old woman leads them to a house. As they watch, Izuku darts up the steps, slips the note under the door, and comes back. It's over in a matter of seconds. Nana is too far away to hear anything, but she can see the woman weep as she bows repeatedly in gratitude and then vanishes into thin air. Izuku stays still for a moment more, then moves on. On to the next one, Nana says cheerily. The next what? I dunno, she says. Favor, I guess. Actually no, favor's the wrong word. Favor implies he's expecting it to be repaid. It's more like a good turn. Community service. For the dead community, she thinks. Incredible. Sure enough, they chase the kids back and forth across Musudafa. Another note to deliver. A front door left unlocked. Food bowls to set out for a colony of stray cats. Little things that add up to a full day. It's only when they all swing in the direction of a junkyard that Izuku's pace slows. It's fine, Deku, Uraraka insists. You already warned us about this kind of stuff before we left, and we don't mind. I already helped you pull a very dirty dog out from under a house, Todoroki adds. This is nothing. Izuku still hesitates, only for a Razorhead to step in. This be the last one for the day anyway, he says. Any more and you three will miss curfew. With a nod, Izuku leads them into the junkyard. Nana drifts over to the fretful ghost who sent them on this errand in the first place. Hey, what are you looking for again? The ghost startles at her sudden appearance. My daughter's toy. It's an orange cat with stripes. She left it in the car after the crash and now she can't sleep without it. Understood. Tonight she says you heard her. Come on, it'll go by faster if we help. She lets Night Eye go his own way, noting how he keeps his distance from Izuku. As far as she knows, he hasn't approached the kid since he first died, much less talked to him. She's trying not to be impatient about it. After all, these things take time. Does he do this sort of thing often? Night Eye asks as they drift through the jumped cars. Sort of, Nana replies. Not often, exactly. But everyone copes in different ways. He says he's been doing it since he was small. It helps him to be helpful. And I can understand that. When things go wrong, it's comforting to remind yourself that you can still do good. Night Eye makes a thoughtful noise. One of the reasons I found what you said so frustrating, she adds, keeping her tone light. It still lands harshly. I didn't know the truth, he says, half to himself. You didn't ask. Nana sweeps past him to glance over a pile of rubbish. You drew your own conclusions and ran with them. Like I said, frustrating. I know, he says, frustrated with himself, not her. It's one thing to be told. It's another to see it for myself. She grins at him. He's got a lot of love to give. He's like Tashi that way. Love and sunshine for everyone he meets. His is just a little spookier, that's all. It takes a little while for Night Eye to answer. Not everyone, he murmurs, and perhaps if Nana were listening with living ears, she wouldn't have heard it. Not me, he doesn't say. She sends him a sad smile. Oh, but he could have, she says. You were just prickly about letting him. He winces. You were. Past tense. You can fix that now. People like us, with nothing left to do but wait for the ones we love, all we have now is time. And when Izuku's around, that's all we need. He'll do the rest. You just have to ask. I found it, Night Eye says, instead of answering. He's standing by another car, a grey minivan with a shattered windshield and mangled front. The back is mostly intact, aside from cracked windows, through which Nana can see the orange stuffed cat lying between the seats. Good, Nana says. You should tell him. He gives her a pained look, and she laughs and he sighs before following her advice. Nana wishes, more than anything, that it could be enough to fix the hurt she knows Izuku is feeling. But she knows it can never be that easy. She hasn't even seen him cry. For once, Shadow doesn't jerk awake in sudden alarm. He isn't startled or shaken awake, it happens quite naturally, as far as he can tell. One moment he's asleep, and the next he's opening his eyes, drowsy but calm. His room comes into focus around him, dark enough that he probably won't have to get up for hours yet. Izuku isn't moving or making any noise beside him, which begs the question as to what woke him up. Shadow shifts carefully, not wanting to disturb him, but it proves pointless when he reaches an angle that he can comfortably look over at Izuku and finds him awake and staring up at the ceiling. His first thought is that a nightmare woke Izuku, who made just enough noise or movement to wake Shadow. But that can't be it, because he's seen Izuku tense and shaken from a recent nightmare, and right now he's neither of those things. Right now, Izuku just looks tired. I just realized something, he says out loud with his voice. Shadow would be more excited about that if only he were more awake. At the moment, it's taking all his sluggish brainpower just to follow along. Aizawa took a hit for me, you know, Izuku goes on. That's how he got captured. That's why he wasn't there when Overhaul came. Almost immediately, Shadow is awake. Even in the mire of sleep, it isn't hard to see where Izuku's thoughts are headed. Uraraka said you and Tagada stopped him, he says. Millimeter, Izuku won't look at him. Tagada. He wasn't there till the end. Before Shadow can answer, he says, I heard from a ghost that Overhaul was far away, in another part of the tunnels. I told him that, and he went. Shadow says nothing. This is the first he's heard of this part. If Aizawa hadn't taken that hit for me, he and Tagada would have both been there. Two perfect counters to Overhaul. For a moment Shadow thinks he's about to cry, but Izuku's eyes stay dry, open, and fixed on the ceiling. But that's not what happened. There was just me. And you still took him down, Shadow points out, quietly. You did what was needed. Izuku doesn't answer at first, as Shadow presses closer in a helpless attempt at being comforting. At some point it will sink in just how close his friend came to not coming back. It's not the first time Izuku has almost gotten killed when Shadow wasn't there. If they become the heroes they hope to be, then it won't be the last. I didn't take him down, Izuku whispers as Shadow starts to drift off again. I couldn't even do that. You're not invincible, Shadow murmurs back. Can't keep blaming yourself every time something goes wrong. He swallows a yawn. You're enough. I don't feel like enough. Okay. I'll just keep saying it till you do. If Izuku says anything after that, Shadow doesn't remember. Objectively, today is a good day. It's overcast, of course. It's well into fall, with winter just around the corner. The air is crisp and fresh from recent rain, and the sky is pale silver instead of the heavy dark gray of rain clouds. It's cold out, but not too cold that going out is too much work. Perfect sweater weather. Less objectively, today could be a lot better. It could be a lot worse, but there's room for improvement. Of course, there's always room for improvement. But in this case, there's a lot of room. Way too much. More than Midoriya knows what to do with. It's barely noon and he's already tired, having cleaned his dorm room twice, scrubbed his bathroom, and neatened up the common room while his classmates were out. He would love nothing more than to be with them, but his homeroom teacher took one look at him this morning and sent him straight back to the dorms, no matter how desperately Midoriya claimed to be fine. He thinks about Sir in the middle of cleaning his bathroom, accidentally scores the scrub brush over his hand, and tells himself that the tears are a pain reflex. Technically he is fine. He's not injured, he's not sick, he's not anything, he's just sad. Who takes sick days for being sad? After he can't find anything more to do around the dormitories, he goes for a run to prove it to himself. At some point he has a plan for how many laps to run, but then he thinks about Sir again and loses count. By the time he wobbles back to his dorm room on legs that feel like clay, it's barely lunchtime. He's beginning to regret urging Tamaki to go to class instead of keeping him company. He underestimated just how long the day would be without classes to fill it. When he passes through the common area to the kitchen, he's struck by a frustrating combination of hunger and nausea. His stomach is empty, but is pretty sure he'll be sick if he tries to eat. Maybe Sensei was right to make him sit out of classes today. He hops in the shower and has a good cry under the spray, and yeah, Sensei was probably right. Still, crying is soothing, and so are showers, and by the time he gets dry and dressed, he thinks that maybe, just maybe, he could manage eating something. Midoriya spends an inordinate amount of time staring into the fridge, taking in containers and bags of his classmates' leftovers, plus the pot of soup Tamaki made yesterday. He can handle soup, can't he? Tamaki won't mind. In fact, Midoriya's pretty sure Tamaki made the soup for him anyway. He realizes with a jolt that he's left the fridge open too long and steps back to close it and gather his thoughts. The door swings shut and Midoriya Izuku stares at him in its place. Midoriya actually jumps because he's a human being and human beings jump when they are startled. There are a lot of things that don't make sense about Midoriya, and his total lack of presence is one of them. It's so consistent that it has to be quirk-related, and how can something like that coexist with strength that turns concrete into gravel? I need to talk to you, Midoriya tells him, while Midoriya is in the middle of getting his breath back. How did you get in here? Midoriya asks. The front door is ID card locked. Borrowed Hado's, Midoriya says. Can we talk? It's important. I am sure. Food can wait. Midoriya is talking again and is here instead of in class or in his own dormitory, and if he says it's important then it must be important. Come on, my room's on the 3rd floor. It's also immaculate from this morning's half-desperate cleaning. It looks like a picture in a catalog, only with more posters and personal effects. Midoriya's eyes rake over it, blinking little. He looks like he hasn't slept much. Midoriya hooks his foot around his desk chair to pull it out, then sits on his bed. So what did you want to talk about? He purses his lips, unsure of what face he should make. He has a very uncomfortable feeling that Midoriya is about to do something silly like try to apologize for what happened, as if any of it was his fault, and Midoriya wants to nip that in the bud as soon as possible if it's the case. But Midoriya has spent the last few weeks silent, so the last thing Midoriya wants to do is interrupt. Midoriya ignores the chair and stands in the middle of the room, putting a bit of distance between them. On the outside he looks relaxed, impassive, but who knows what's going on inside his head. I trust you, Midoriya says bluntly. You're honest and you act loud and over the top all the time, but you have more common sense than most of the people I've met in my entire life. Says Midoriya. Thanks. So I know when I asked you to keep this a secret, you will, Midoriya goes on. Especially after you hear what it is. Of course, Midoriya says automatically. Midoriya falls silent for a moment, collecting his thoughts, until finally, do you know what my quirk is? What? My quirk, Midoriya repeats. I can't remember if I ever told you what it was. Strength enhancement, Midoriya says hesitantly. I think. And possibly sense enhancement. There seems to be a lot more to it. Midoriya nods. You said you saw the sports festival, right? You saw me. What I did to myself. Midoriya nods, still uncertain. It looked pretty bad. You have better control now than you did back then. That's because I've had it 9 months instead of 3, Midoriya says. You what? Midoriya does a few mental calculations. Your quirk came in last February. A connection is made. Wait, that's entrance exam season. Midoriya nods. I got it the morning of. If you thought the festival was bad, you should have seen what I did to myself then. Midoriya stares, speechless. I could lie and tell you that I was just a late bloomer with a freak mutation. Midoriya won't meet Midoriya's eyes anymore. But I'm not. It was given to me. It has 2 parts, power stockpiling and passing on at will. It's strong because it's passed through enough hands to make it that strong. It's called One for All. His eyes flicker to Midoriya's only briefly. Are you with me so far? Yes, Midoriya says, otherwise dumbstruck. Holy shit. Holy shit. 10 months before I got it, I met All Might, and I guess I made a good impression, Midoriya says. Because he decided he wanted me to have his quirk. Holy fucking shit. Why? Midoriya pauses to swallow with his dry throat. Why are you telling me this? Because Night, I wanted it to be you. Hearing Sir's name, after spending the past few hours trying not to let himself think it, is like having his head forced underwater. What? He wanted you to take One for All, Midoriya says. He thought you were perfect. You have a good quirk, you're strong, you're determined, and you're good. You're a good person and you do great things with it. The only reason why you don't have it is that All Might ran into me before he had the chance to meet you. Midoriya chokes out. He's been fighting against his own head all day, forcing down the memories just so they won't drown out everything else in the silence, running himself ragged just to try to stay ahead of them. And now. He isn't lying. Midoriya wouldn't just lie about something like this. He's not that kind of person, and even if he were, there's nothing to be gained from making up something like this. It's the truth. That's the only way any of this makes sense. But it doesn't make sense because Sir never told him, he never. Why are you telling me this? He asked again. Because after everything that's happened, I can see where Night Eye was coming from, Midoriya says. It was supposed to be yours. So now I'm asking you if you want it. What? I mean, I think it's safe to say you'd be better at it than I am, Midoriya says with a shrug. It's almost convincing, almost enough to hide the trembling, wire-taut tension in his voice. And not that it's hard. I've set the bar pretty low. I'm just sorry it took so much for me to realize that. It shouldn't have. I should have figured it out back at Kamino. The words pull Midoriya back up, out from under the icy depths of whatever drowning pit his grief keeps dragging him into. He can breathe again. It shouldn't be this way, it shouldn't take somebody else's pain to clear his head, but sometimes it's easier to help someone else than it is to help himself. And there's just so much wrong with what he just heard that he can't let it go uncorrected. This is what you and Sir were arguing about before, wasn't it? He says once he finds his voice. Midoriya nods. I could tell there was something about you he didn't approve of, and you were challenging him on it, Midoriya says. I just didn't know what it was. At least that much makes sense now. He could never figure out what Sir had against Midoriya, but this makes sense, as much as he hates to admit it. Sir was stubborn, even rigid. Maybe that was what happened when you were used to knowing the future, you got used to staying on one path. He shakes his head. You never seemed to care about what he thought of you, he says. I liked that about you. He was intimidating, but you didn't let it shake you. He can almost feel the compliment slide off of Midoriya, never catching. What changed? Midoriya stares at him like it's the dumbest question he ever heard. I got him killed, Mirio. Mirio isn't sure what surprises him more, the use of his first name or the crack spreading through Midoriya's cold shell of nonchalance. I walked him into a trap and I slowed down everyone who could have helped, Midoriya continues, almost viciously. Even A. She could have saved him, but she didn't because she had to save me instead. His voice breaks, but he doesn't stop. And it made me realize that maybe I'm not the right person after all. Maybe All Might was wrong about me. Maybe I was right the first time and I was just too stubborn and arrogant to admit it. He stops to flinch as if someone's shouting in his ear. He stops again and doesn't continue until his voice is just a little bit steadier. I just had this moment of clarity. No, you didn't, Mirio says. Midoriya stares at him, startled into momentary silence, and Mirio happily presses into it. He's heard enough. You've been confident in your own abilities this entire time. Mirio ignores the way Midoriya's hands curl into fists. And you should be. You've been getting things done with or without that quirk, wherever it came from. You saved Air the day you met her. You protected her when the League tried to take her back. You did, Midoriya says, quiet and tense. If it had just been me, they would have taken her. And if you hadn't been there to slow them down, it wouldn't have mattered if I got there or not. Anyone can slow a villain down. Maybe so, Mirio says. Maybe others could do the things you've done, maybe they couldn't. That doesn't matter. You were the one who was there. You were the one who did them. Midoriya opens his mouth to argue, but falters when Mirio stands up. So not everything went the way you wanted this time. You made mistakes and there were consequences. And now you think the rest of it doesn't matter anymore? Midoriya flinches again. That's not clarity, Mirio says. That's doubt. Don't get them confused. He knows it's coming. He sees it in the sheen in Midoriya's eyes, hears it in the hitching breath that breaks the silence that follows. In a matter of seconds, whatever dam Midoriya built up against it breaks down, and his watery eyes and uneven breathing turn into soft crying. In 2 steps he closes the distance between them and pulls Midoriya into a hug. The kid stiffens up for a split second, then rocks into him with a hoarse, muffled wail. I'm sorry. You don't have anything to be sorry for. Midoriya shakes his head furiously. If anything, I should be the sorry one, Mirio says, and his voice wobbles when his throat almost squeezes itself shut. I should have been there to help you. You should never have had to face that alone. I wasn't, Midoriya sobs. I wasn't alone, but it didn't even matter. I've tried. I tried so hard, but I couldn't. Of course you did. I know that. Mirio gives him a pat. I haven't said thank you yet, so I'm saying it now. Thank you, Deku. It wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. Hey. Mirio forces himself to let go, pushes Midoriya gently back so they are looking each other in the eye. Don't forget, so was there with you. And he wasn't enough, either. He wasn't strong enough to save himself, either. All the other pro-heroes in this mission weren't even strong enough to be there to help. And I wasn't fast enough to reach you until it was too late to save him. He squeezes Midoriya's shoulders, forcing him to look at him instead of the floor. This is not all on you. Do you understand? And you're doing no one any favors by trying to give up now. He levels a steady glare through his own tears. I won't let you give up on yourself. Midoriya holds his gaze for a few moments before shutting his eyes and taking a deep, shaky breath. When he's sure the kid isn't about to keel over, Mirio lets go. Midoriya takes a few more breaths and the tears finally subside. Feels a little better, doesn't it? Mirio says, wiping his own eyes. A little, Midoriya admits. Sorry about that. Don't be sorry. In fact, new rule, you're not allowed to apologize for anything for the rest of the day. I mean it, he adds when he sees Midoriya wince. I don't blame you for what happened. It never even crossed my mind to blame you. And I know that, his voice catches. I know he'd feel the same. I know you didn't get along, but he wouldn't blame you for this, either. I know, Midoriya says, with a raspy cough that almost sounds like a wretched laugh. I know that. He swipes his hand over his eyes. It's hard to. His voice trails off. Tired, reddened eyes meet Mirio's again, worry and considering. Mirio feels like he's being sized up for something, and his smile fades with confusion and worry. At last, Midoriya seems to come to a silent decision, and his eyes flicker away again. It's hard to believe that sometimes, he says. Even when he says it to my face. Not for the first time, Mirio's mind goes momentarily blank. He hears the words, even understands them individually. Taken together, they stop making sense. What? Midoriya's eyes slide shut. It's been hard, just trying to look him in the eye. He's been patient, though. When they ask him to give me space, he listens. I appreciate that. Midoriya, what are you talking about? Mirio can't describe how those words make him feel, only that it's some flavor of uncomfortable. Green eyes open again. Do you remember when you sparred with my class and you asked me afterward how I predicted you? Yes. I didn't predict shit. Midoriya braces himself. I've only had one for all since last February, but I've been talking to the dead since I was little. For some reason, Mirio's first instinct is to laugh. Not his usual full-throated belly laugh, but one of those thin, warbly noises he only makes when he's nervous or desperate to fill the silence. He just manages to cut it off before it leaves his throat, and what emerges instead is, you. What? Midoriya gives him another one of his strange, piercing looks, as if he's weighing Mirio against something else. I can leave now, if you want, he says. Let it sink in, what that all means. If you need. If you don't believe me yet. It's a lot, I know. Or. Mirio squeaks out. He wants to talk to you, Izuku says. There are things he didn't get to say before. Only if you're ready. He can wait if you're not. For once in his life, Mirio genuinely doesn't know what to say. He can only stare at him, pleadingly for what? What does he want? He doesn't even know what he wants, just that he does. Midoriya tilts his head to the side, as if he can read Mirio's thoughts better at a different angle. For the record, he says, even if you said yes to me before, I would have done this before I gave it to you. He activates his quirk, one for all, and reaches out to grasp something that Mirio can't say. There's a surge of green lightning, and then... As shocked as Mirio is to see him, so looks even more surprised to be sane. He blinks, only his eyes out there no more. They are white and empty, but other than that. This lasts about 20 minutes, Midoriya says. If you need more time than that, come get me. With that, he leaves. Mirio barely notices. It's not like it was before, so isn't like he was before. His eyes are gone, and is pale and tired looking. He looks like a man who's just died but is still somehow awake. I'm sorry it took so long to get back to you, Sir Night Eye says, awkward and unsure in a way that Mirio has never seen him before. They said it was better to give you some time. And I'll admit, this has taken some getting used to for me, as well. Mirio stares. Too much? Night Eye asks. I did say I wanted to see what you would become with my own eyes. I meant it. Mirio chokes out something that is either a laugh or a sob or both, as he launches himself forward and confirms that his mentor really is solid and real and here. Izuku flops down on the common room couch, almost landing in Shouder's lap. He's tired, mentally and physically, and he didn't even attend all his classes today. Aizawa-sensei stopped him halfway through a training and sent him back to the dorms for reasons that Izuku would rather not think about right now. He's had quite enough of feeling things too deeply for today. Where'd you go? Shouder asks, scooting over so that he can sit more comfortably without Shouder's knee jabbing into his side. Third year dorms, Izuku answers. How was class? Fine. Are you all right? I am now, Izuku says. Kind of. I mean, I'm better than I was when I left. He'd been dissociating pretty hard when he left, and when he finally came out of it, he'd been standing in front of the dorm building with Hadu's borrowed keycard. And after battle, I worked some stuff out. Oh. Good. Shadow considers him for a moment, as if debating whether to ask what kind of stuff was worked out. Do you want to talk about it? Not with you. He's still working out the tangle in his own head at the moment. The last thing he wants to do is try to wrestle at incoherent words. He looks over just in time to see Shadow's crestfallen face and realizes belatedly how that sounded. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I mean, this isn't really a friends and loved ones kind of problem. Shadow frowns at him. What kind of problem is it? Izuku's tongue catches in his mouth, and for a moment he considers not telling him. There's no real reason why he shouldn't. None of their classmates are close enough to hear, and it's Shadow. He can tell Shadow anything. But it's embarrassing. He knows it isn't bad, he knows he needs it, he knows plenty of heroes need it, but that doesn't stop his stomach from shriveling up at the thought of admitting it out loud. But it's Izuku swallows hard. Sir, here's the thing. There's been a lot happening, right? Shadow stares at him. To me, specifically. A lot. Izuku shifts to sit cross-legged, their knees bonding. He speaks quietly and hopes that Shuji and Jiru aren't eavesdropping. There's the dead people thing, and that's been around for a long time. And then there's everything else this year. Kamina and what happened at my internship. His voice trails off. Shadow keeps watching him carefully, as if checking to see if he's hiding an injury. Has something changed, he asks. Sort of. Not a bad change, though, he says quickly. It's just, see, Aizawa-sensei knows about all of it, and he decided that it'd be best if I go to therapy. Shadow blinks, realization dawning in his eyes. Oh, he says, and lets out a short breath. Oh. Good. Yeah, good, Izuku says, swallowing a sigh of relief. I mean, that's what Aizawa-sensei says. It'll be good for me. It should be, if you find the right therapist, Shadow says, nodding. Make sure you do. The first one isn't always the best. Izuku stares at him. Shadow shrugs. That's what my mother says. She went through 2 of them before she found one that really helped. Oh. I don't think he cared, Shadow says with a touch of bitterness. He just wanted to keep her from doing what she did again and to send her away before the media found out. But it helped her to talk to people who knew how to help her. She's been able to heal that way. Didn't hurt to be away from him, too. Aizawa-sensei said something like that, Izuku says cautiously. Not about your mom, of course. But he says a lot of pro-heroes do it, and it's an unofficial requirement for underground heroes. Shadow hums thoughtfully. Makes sense. Are you nervous? Sort of. Izuku pauses. Does your mom, say anything else about it? Not a lot. It's private. I think that's the point. Shadow shoots him an encouraging look. But it helps, that's the main thing she says. It helps and you shouldn't be ashamed, no matter what others think. Izuku nods. The snarl of thoughts in his head is set aside for now, and the ones that drift in to replace it are clearer. What do you think? He asks. I think it'll help you, too, Shadow says. What about you? Shadow's brow wrinkles in confusion. What about me? I mean... Izuku hesitates, gives himself one last chance to bail before he oversteps and goes for it. Have you ever considered it? That it might help you. He doesn't get an answer right away. He's not sure whether Shadow's silence means he has or hasn't thought about it before. It's just, Izuku continues before he can stop himself. Your mom's not the only one he hurt, so... He hasn't hurt me in a while, Shadow says shortly. I haven't trained with him since we started living here. Oh hey, are we talking about Endeavor? Hino pokes his head through the door, literally through it. Did you know he's been blowing up the kid's phone lately? He's been left on read for weeks, but he won't take the hint. As if on cue, Shadow's phone chimes. He checks it, scowls, and shoves it under his pillow. Was that? It's not important, Shadow says. He's just texting me, that's nothing compared to everything else he's done. It's nothing compared to everything that's happened to you. It's not a contest, Izuku says dryly. Shadow doesn't answer. It's just Izuku finds himself running his finger along the scars on his hand, tracing the lines from one end to the other. When we first met, you weren't exactly in a good place. You're not in that place anymore. I hope you're somewhere better. It feels like you are, but... I am, Shadow says. Thanks to you. Izuku smiles weakly at him. I'm glad I could help, he says. But I'm not that good. Shadow doesn't agree out loud. But he does look thoughtful. Coming here isn't solely for Izuku's own benefit. Obviously this is good for him and he has to do it for his own sake, but... He's also holding Eri's hand as they cross the parking lot with Aizawa-sensei. She huddles close and he won't be able to stay with her the whole time, but he's with her now and it's enough to get her in the door. Rei hovers on the other side of her, unseen, but Eri knows she's there. Izuku made sure to tell her, it seems to comfort her. GD Hospital looks no different from any other hospital that Izuku has ever seen. That's the way it should be. Heaven forbid they advertise it as a tempting target, but part of him feels that a hospital that caters almost exclusively to pro-heroes and their families should at least look the part. Extra patrols, more security, something like that. He mentions as much to Aizawa, who snorts. Who says there aren't any? He doesn't elaborate. Eri's hand trembles in Izuku's as Aizawa leads them inside to the lobby, and Izuku draws her close while Aizawa speaks with the receptionist. She's not any less nervous than she was when she first got in the car. Are you sure you can't stay with me, she whispers, when Aizawa leaves the front desk to lead them down the first hallway. They'll be in the same wing but different rooms. They might not even finish at the same time. Izuku's heart twists painfully. The first thing she ever said to him was a plea for him to stay, breaking that now feels wrong. Aizawa will be with you, he reminds her. If you don't feel good talking to the doctor, you can tell him, and he'll take you to the room I'm in so you can wait for me. She looks uncertain, which is better than terrified. You know, Rei could stay with you again. You wouldn't be able to see her, but she'd be with you. Would that make it better? Eri thinks this over, apparently very deeply, before finally shaking her head. I have Aizawa-san, she says softly. If I have Rei too, then you won't have anyone. Not entirely true, hospitals are never totally free of ghosts. But they are all strangers to him, so Er still has a point. All right, he says. If you're sure. She nods, her mouth tight and determined. It's the same look she had when she tried to give herself up to Compress and when she unleashed her power on Chisaki. You know something, Eri, he says. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met. She stares at him, shocked and confused, and he just smiles. Remember, this is meant to help you. If it doesn't, then you don't have to stay. All you have to do is try. Eren nods and doesn't protest again. She also doesn't let go of his hand until the very last minute, when they absolutely have to. If your session finishes first, just wait outside, Aizawa tells him when they are all called in. Don't wander off. It goes not badly. The bar was already low. All Izuku wanted to do was tell her about his quirk without being laughed out of her office or squinted at and questioned about where he thought these delusions might be coming from. Dr. Kaneyama does none of those things. She listens, she nods along like it's the most perfectly sane thing in the world, and only barely smiles when Izuku stumbles over his disbelief. It isn't that outrageous, she says matter-of-factly. If a man can involuntarily warp into various alternate dimensions, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be communicating with the dead. I am not a quirk counselor, and it is not my job to question your abilities. I'm here to give you the tools you'll need to sort it out how you see best. So it goes well. So well, in fact, that it ends a little early with Izuku running out of mental energy and things to say to her. He's tired, but comfortably so. He feels helped. He does make an earnest attempt to stay close to the other door, he really does. But he also really needs to go to the bathroom, and finding it hardly qualifies as wandering off, right? Aizawa can't possibly get mad at him for using the facilities. It's just, he loses track of the route and Rei wanders off to bother some of the ghosts in the hospital, and he gets turned around on the way back. He's furiously embarrassed by the time he realizes he doesn't know how to get back, because of all the possible reasons to disobey Aizawa. This is definitely the dumbest. Grumbling to himself, he glances around for Ray, or even a ghost that he doesn't know, because anyone who haunts this place probably knows their way round. Soon enough, a pale figure slips around a corner, looking around furtively, and Izuku opens his mouth to call out to them. A familiar face turns to him, and Hino freezes where he stands. Izuku stares at him. "What are you?" "Shit." Immediately Hino's shoving at him. Go, you need to get out of here, right now." He's urgent but not scared, which only leaves Izuku confused as he stumbles to obey. There's probably no danger, but then why? "Don't freak out," Hino hisses by his ear as a second figure steps out from around the same corner. Unlike Hino, this one is alive. Like Hino, he is also familiar, in spite of the medical mask covering the worst of the scars. There's no mistaking those eyes. Izuku tenses as he's grabbed and pulled out of the main hallway. His back hits the wall, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to jolt his hold of one for all. Dabi looms over him, glaring over the edge of the mask. He looks different when he's dressed in baddie street clothes, his hair red and reeking of fresh dye. Not different enough for Izuku to forget being punched and kicked on a warehouse floor, but different enough that the average civilian wouldn't recognize him. Izuku glares up at him, tense but not terrified. Dabi isn't like Toga or like Compress. He doesn't dig into any old traumas and has never shown much interest in Izuku himself beyond his obligations as a member of the League. But he's also an unknown. Izuku doesn't know what he wants or why. Then again, he can guess. "Don't yell," Dabi growls at him. He doesn't follow it up with a threat, but seeing as they are standing in a hospital, he doesn't really need to. "No point. For once, I'm not here to start anything." "What do you want?" Izuku asks, proud of himself for keeping his voice steady. Maybe therapy really does help with regulating his emotions. "What are you doing here?" After a moment, Dabi lets go and steps back, shoving his hands in his jacket pockets. Between the clothes and the slouch, he almost looks like a normal 20-something. It's surreal. "Like you need to ask me that," the villain says, almost sullen. "What are you so pissy about?" "I'm just following your advice." Izuku's confusion must show on his face, because Dabi makes a scornful noise. "What, you don't know where you are right now?" "Jihi Hospital." Izuku almost forgets to be suspicious, because if he didn't know better, he'd think they were having a civilized conversation. "Really? That's all you got?" Dabi glares at him. "Guess it didn't mean much that Shigaraki thought you were smart." Izuku's eyes flicker toward Hino. The ghost hovers nearby, looking anxiously from one of them to the other. When he catches Izuku looking, he winces. "My sister's here," he says. "5th floor." He really isn't doing anything, I've been watching. The confusion lasts a split second longer before Izuku remembers the last time he was face to face with Dabi. He sucks in a breath. "You're visiting your mother," he realizes. "I didn't know she was here." "Yeah, you and the rest of the country," Dabi spits. "Seems like a risk," Izuku says cautiously. Dabi rolls his eyes. "For Endeavor, I mean. Putting his dirty secret in a hospital that's crawling with other heroes." Dabi's eyes narrow. "Nobody asks about the permanent patients," he says. "Secure hospital, secure records. Not that it's any of your business." "Since we are talking about how secure this place is," Izuku says, "tell me why I shouldn't start yelling to the nearest pros that there's a league member here." Actually, Hino begins. "Because we are in a hospital and I'm a villain," Dabi says, raising an eyebrow. "A hospital with your mom in it," Izuku says. Dabi actually growls at him. "Fine. Because I'm not in the league anymore." "What? Do you know why?" Dabi asks. "Because there is no league. The shadow leader and the brains are dead. Shigaraki's shithouse rat crazy. The rest are being picked off one by one, Madna's dead, and Compress and Toga are headed to prison. There was one thing I wanted out of that mess, and I can tell I'm not getting it. Not from Shigaraki." "You don't have to be in the league to be a villain," Izuku retorts. Dabi's eyes glint. "Dabi's a villain," he says. "Good thing no one knows who Dabi is, Achan. No one but you." He steps closer again. "So, we are at an impasse." Like you said, this place is crawling with heroes, so I probably don't have time to cook your brain and get out before this place slimes into emergency mode. And even if I did, apparently my brother's attached to you. Izuku bristles. What? Mom says he talks about you. Also, hurt him and I'll boil the fluids in your eyeballs. Izuku's temper flares. Like you have any right to talk, he snarls back. Shit, touched a nerve. Dabi sounds amused. Good. Did you tell him about me? I should, Izuku snaps. You can, if you like. It won't matter now. Dabi leans against the wall. I'll be laying low for a while. There are things I need to take care of as Tuya, not Dabi. In fact, I could use your help. You're asking me for a favor now? Izuku asks dryly. You might like it, Dabi says. All you have to do is pass along a message to Endeavor when you get the chance. Tell him all about me. Tell him I'm watching. If he doesn't believe you, remind him of what happened on March 8th when I was 12. What for? Because I'm watching, and Dabi can always come back if I don't like what I say. Dabi's eyes narrow like he's smiling. If he hurts Mother again. If he hurts Shadow. How would his new adoring fans react if they knew he raised a villain? He's no All Might. His pillar's made of toothpicks, and it's not gonna take much to crack it. Izuku blinks. Look me in the eye and tell me he doesn't deserve it, Dabi says coldly. Tell me it's not a small price to pay for everything he's done. It's the fallout I'd be worried about, Izuku shoots back. Losing another #1 hero right after All Might. Like the world needs more chaos. In a flash, Dabi is looming over him again, crowding him back against the wall. I'd burn the world on a spit if it meant that bastard couldn't touch my family again, he snarls. Keep that in mind. You get in the way, I'll burn you too. Whether Shadow forgives me for it or not. I'll keep that in mind, Izuku says coldly. Dabi holds his glare for a few more seconds before, at last, he steps away. Well, so long, he says. And who knows? If we are both lucky, we might never see each other again. Or if we do, you'll be calling me Tuya. With that, he's gone. Izuku watches him go, fists clenched, and doesn't shout for the nearest heroes. He doesn't raise any alarms. He probably should. But he doesn't. Thank you, he no breathes. There's only one reason I didn't try to stop him, Izuku says. Of all the League members, Dabi was one of the only ones who never had ghosts. I'll tell you if that changes, Hino says grimly. Izuku looks at him, surprised. It's rare to hear him so serious. I'll keep an eye on him, the ghost assures him. I don't have to worry about Shadow, you have him handled. But Tuya? Thank you, Izuku says. Are you going to do what he says? Hino asks. 'Cause I'm pretty sure that'd be blackmail. Not that Endeavor doesn't deserve it and more, but... I'm not going to blackmail him, Izuku says calmly. Innocently. I'm going to tell him who Dabi is, because as the #1 hero, he should know. And I might remind him about what that means for him, because he should know that too. If he wants to take blackmail from that, then that's on him, not me. Shadow too, he thinks. Shadow deserves to know. Shadow deserves a say in what to do about it. Ray finds him again shortly after that, and Izuku finds his way back just in time to see Azar stepping out with Eri at his heels, followed by a woman that Izuku assumes to be the child therapist assigned to her. He assumes that until another man follows her out, which leaves him wondering why there were two of them. Azar catches sight of him walking back instead of waiting outside and raises an eyebrow. I was in the bathroom, Izuku says. The encounter with Dabi lingers in the back of his throat, and he weighs the pros and cons of speaking up before putting it in the Ask Shadow file. Explaining the situation with Dabi means explaining the situation with Shadow and Endeavor. Aizawa nods at him, then steps away to speak with the woman. Eri clings to his lead and follows, glancing back at Izuku as if weighing her options before deciding to stay put for now. Izuku can't help but smile. You must be Deko. Izuku turns to the man, surprised but not alarmed. He's not expecting to be addressed, but the man has a calming presence that keeps Izuku from getting uncomfortable over it. His eyes are a strange shade of yellow and there's a nick through his eyebrow, but his smile is soft and pleasant as he dips in a little bow of greeting. Excuse my forwardness, but Eri-chan talked a lot about you during her session with Dr. Watanabe. She trusts you very much. Oh, Izuku says, still puzzled. He shoots a look at Rei, just for someone to share his confusion with, only to find her staring at the man with a blank look on her face. She doesn't even notice him looking over. Sorry, but Dr. Watanabe is Eri's therapist, right? That's right, the man says. I'm a quirk counselor myself, but Watanabe and I often work together. Unique and high-risk quirks are my specialty, so she called me in to help with Eri-chan. Oh. Confusion neutralized, Izuku shifts into a more comfortable stance. The only odd thing left about the man isn't even his fault, it's the fact that Rei hasn't started poking at him yet. Yeah, Eri's quirk is something. So is Eri-chan herself. The man casts a soft look in her direction. She has a ways to go, but she's survived a lot for a little girl her age. He sighs a little. She's so small, though. My Hitomi's about that age. I see. It takes a moment for Izuku to register it. Wait, sorry, who? My daughter Hitomi, the man says with a crooked grin. She's about 6 now. Old enough for me to really start worrying. But it feels better knowing there are heroes like you ready to walk the streets. Izuku's heart quickens, and it shouldn't, because it's just a name. There are hundreds of girls with that name, so why? Sorry, what did you say your name was? Ah. He shakes his head, embarrassed. Forgive me, my mind's all over the place. I'm Muragawa Shizuo. He can feel the air around Rei vibrate. Her hair twists and curls like tangled snakes. She doesn't take her eyes off of the man in front of them. Muragawa Hitomi, Izuku whispers. Sorry. And nothing, Izuku says. Just, it's a nice name, that's all. Muragawa Shizuo's face softens. For a moment, his eyes are distant. Yellow eyes, Izuku realizes. Yellow eyes and black hair. My older sister's name, he says. Or at least it was. Maybe she has a different one now. Oh? Izuku answers. His own voice sounds very far away. Yes. Muragawa purses his lips as if wondering whether or not to continue. She had a quirk that was simple in its own right. Amplifying emotions. It was my opposite, in fact, I calmed them. And the home that we grew up in was not the best for a quirk like hers. Our parents made a certain decision when I was far too young to do anything about it and didn't keep the paperwork afterward. He clears his throat. So, Eri hits close to home for me. Behind his calm face, Izuku is reeling. Out loud, he says, you still remember her? Your sister? Of course. Muragawa smiles ruefully. I think about her all the time. That's why I'm here, you know. Helping children manage difficult quirks so fewer parents make the same decision as mine or Eri's mother for that matter. Oh, Izuku says faintly. I don't know where she is now, Muragawa says. Perhaps I'll never know. But I hope she found her way to people who love her. Izuku can't speak through the tightness in his throat, so he nods instead. Well, Eri's in good hands, both here and with you, Muragawa says. Have a good day, Deku-kun. I hope to see you and Eri-chan again soon. He turns to leave, feeling nothing when Rei's hand catches at his sleeve and passes through it. She keeps her hand out as he walks away, reaching but not following. Rei, he murmurs. Rei, is that? Her lips barely move, but her whisper reaches Izuku's ears. He's so big now. It's about time for them to leave, and air brightens at Izuku's approach. Deku-san. Her face falls when she looks at him. Deku-san. Are you crying? Oh. So he is. It's fine, he tells her. I think I just found out something happy. It is happy, isn't it? It's a happy thing that someone remembers. That someone cared about Muragawa Hitomi. Let's talk, he says, and Night Eye flickers the way most ghosts do when they are startled. Oh, Night Eye says, surprised and relieved and hopeful and worried all at once. From that point on, Izuku's job becomes a walk, not that he minds much. The UA campus is very nice, especially once you hit the surrounding trees. It's like an arboretum all the way down the hill, which makes for better jogging scenery than a treadmill in a gym. The perfect place to wander along the paths and talk to thin air. Have you been okay? He asks. As well as can be expected, Night Eye answers, still with an air of faint surprise. The others have been welcoming. Shimoa and Ingenium especially. Yeah, they are pretty great. Izuku grins, falling silent as he considers what to say. He hasn't talked to Night Eye much since the hospital really, and he knows that he should. He's tired of being at odds with him, and is tired of feeling the remains of their conflict hanging over his head along with everything that came out of Night Eye's death. It's not that he doesn't blame himself for what happened anymore, he sort of does, and he sort of always will. There's a part of him that keeps running through every detail of the fight, pointing out every little mistake he could have fixed, and maybe no amount of pep talks and therapy will make it go away forever. Thank you, Night Eye says, quiet but emphatic. For what you did for Mirio and me. That was kind of you. Izuku makes a non-committal noise. He doesn't want to talk about what happened with Mirio, mostly because of what happened before he brought Night Eye into it. He hasn't even told All Might about what he offered to do, and he would be perfectly happy pretending that it never happened. Would you really have given one for all to Mirio if he'd said yes? Night Eye asks. At that point, probably, Izuku admits. And I definitely would have regretted it. It was stupid, and I'm glad he had the common sense to tell me I was an idiot. He told you no such thing, Night Eye informs him. You're not an idiot. You're a 16-year-old boy and you just experienced something terrible. You panicked and tried to overcorrect. It happens. Izuku tenses, if only because he's not used to Night Eye trying to be comforting. It's not bad, just odd and unfamiliar. My therapist said something like that, he admits, forcing himself loose again. Well, good, Night Eye grumbles a little. It's long overdue that you had one, in my opinion. I still have a long way to go, Izuku admits. There's a lot to get through. You have a lot of healing and growing to do, Night Eye says. I may have acted the fool, but even I could see that before. He pauses. Hopefully the first lesson you learn is how to value your own safety. Anything's possible, Izuku says with a shrug. He doesn't mean much of anything by it, but Night Eye turns to consider him for a moment. He's almost smiling, and Izuku can count the number of times Night Eye has smiled at him on one hand. Yes, Night Eye remarks, almost talking to himself. I'm coming to realize that, with you. And that's almost a compliment, which is a step further than almost a smile. Izuku looks away, hoping his embarrassment doesn't show on his face. Regret, too, because if he were really capable of impossible things, then Night Eye would still be alive. I'm not just saying that, Night Eye says. You are impossible, and not just because you're a Razorhead's problem child. Nothing about you is probable or likely. After 6 years of playing things safe, you can imagine my frustration. I didn't have to, Izuku says dryly. It's a low blow, enough to make Night Eye flicker and wince, but that doesn't make it any less true. I suppose not, Night Eye admits, subdued. And I'm sorry. I know that I've said it before, but it's worth repeating. Most of my frustrations had nothing to do with you, but you bore them anyway. And now, he hesitates. Now I have a chance to right my wrongs, and I wouldn't if it weren't for you. It's what I do, Izuku says with a shrug. You're not special. No, Night Eye agrees. No, you'd do this for any spirit who asked, wouldn't you? I mean, within reason, Izuku answers. I do have to sleep sometimes. But I do my best. Night Eye shakes his head wonderingly. A while ago I compared this power of yours to autopsy, gathering information from the dead to bring them justice. But here you are, soothing restless spirits, putting souls to rest like a psychopomp. It's remarkable. He catches his breath, such that he is breath anymore. I'm going to spend the rest of whatever this is kicking myself for not seeing it sooner. Better late than never, Izuku thinks. And the people around him can usually afford to be later than most. He also thinks, psychopomp. He's never thought of a proper name for his quirk before, but he sort of likes the sound of that. And if that's not enough, you had to go and twist the future, Night Eye goes on. You did, by the way. I saw Chisaki's future play out. Your death, his escape from the tunnels. And none of it happened the way I saw it. I have a theory about that, actually, Izuku says. Night Eye falls silent, curious. More like a hypothesis, and I don't really have a way to test it. But it's interesting to think about. What do you mean? Night Eye asks. Your quirk has never made sense to me, Izuku says. The way All Might described it, anyway. You use your quirk, look into someone's future, and what? That's it. It can't change. There's only ever one option. It can't work that way. The world can't work that way. If the future is just one path and one possibility for every choice, then what about probability? What about the quirks that affect them? Night Eye doesn't answer, either because he's listening too closely or because he doesn't have one. Izuku doesn't think there is one. You used your quirk on Chisaki, he goes on. That's when you saw the things he did. When did it start going off the rails? When he killed you, Night Eye says. You died differently, in my vision. And he met no resistance, just took Eri and left the tunnels. I assumed that my quirk didn't account for your ability to circumvent death itself. Could be that, Izuku says. Or it could have been what happened right before that. Did you see it? He smiles. Did you see when Eri used her quirk on him and turned him all the way back to before he'd taken trigger? Before you used your quirk on him. Night Eye stops. Izuku stops too. What if your quirk wasn't just about showing you the future, he asks. What if it let you pick a path, too? Night Eye is gaping at him as the full weight of what Izuku is suggesting descends upon him. I don't think I twisted the future to save Eri, he says. I think in that moment she saved herself. But if that's the case, then everything terrible that I've ever seen was my undoing, Night Eye whispers. Midoriya, if that's true, then if Toshinori still dies, it could be my fault. It would mean that I doomed him. Maybe. Maybe I'm wrong. Honestly, I'm almost hoping I'm not. How can you say that? Night Eye demands. Because it's just a quirk, Izuku says. I know about quirks and how they function. I know they have limits. If saving All Might means fighting against some cosmic destiny, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to fight against fate or destiny. I don't know how to fight against the universe. He looks sidelong at Night Eye. But I think I could take you. Night Eye chokes out a laugh. It doesn't happen the way it did the first time. A city park is not a crowded mall. Fewer people, fewer risks other than himself. He isn't caught off guard. He sees it coming long before it happens. A not insignificant part of him almost wants it to happen. After all, it's not as if he'd be facing it alone. He's never alone. He's sitting on a park bench with an off-campus pass in his coat pocket and a bag of groceries hanging in his hands, breathing clouds of mist into the chilly air. He used to do this when he was tiny, pretending he could breathe fire just for fun. He sniffles, wrinkling his nose against the cold. The bench creaks as someone sits beside him. Hello, Shigaraki, says Izuku. The villain hisses beside him. You knew I was coming. His voice is a low, grating rasp. Why didn't you run and get help? Same reason you're here, Izuku replies. Thought it'd be nice to talk. He shoots a glance at Shigaraki again. For a villain with such a menacing reputation, he doesn't have a lot of ghosts. It's almost as if they avoid him. Izuku has to wonder if any ghosts still exist on Earth that truly know him, that knew Shimoa Tenko before he was Shigaraki Tamura. So how have you been? Izuku asks. I've been good, I guess. Therapy helps a lot. You should try it. Shigaraki snarls quietly. Everyone's gone. Ah. First Magna got herself killed. Then you shits took Compress and Toda. Don't know where the hell Dabby went. Spinner and Twice still hang around, but I know it won't be long. I know it. Sounds lonely, Izuku says. I can start over, Shigaraki says simply. Build up a new league. Claw my way back to the top. You think I can't? I think a lot of things about you, Izuku admits. Yeah? Like what? I think something terrible happened to you, Izuku replies. I don't know what. I haven't met anyone who knows. Shigaraki coils up like a spring-loaded snake, tense and angry. What's it to you? I'll find out eventually, Izuku tells him. I want to know before I figure out what to do. What to fix if it can be fixed. The villain goes quiet, though his coiled spring spine doesn't relax. It can't, he says, almost uncharacteristically quiet. Won't know that until I try, Izuku says. Shigaraki rounds on him, his ravaged face twisted in a menacing scowl. What, you think you can sweet-talk me? Bet your little eyes and turn me good. He bares his teeth. Don't make me laugh. You can't speech me into stopping. Sensei made me new. Whatever I was before then, that's dead. Izuku laughs. Maybe I have a chance then, he says. I've spent my whole life helping people who were past saving. I could kill you first. I could kill you right now. I guess you have a point, Izuku admits. There's nothing I can do if you don't want to listen. Something settles inside of him. And I can't afford to risk people's lives by trying. At the end of the day, I have a job to do, and you're a danger to the people around you no matter who they are. His head is clear when he gets up from the bench. The bag in his hand swings heavy, the snack cabinet at the dorms needs restocking. His classmates might worry if he takes much longer. There are two ways I see this playing out, he says to the man who used to be a child named Shimura Tenka before All for One took him and twisted him into something new and vindictive and terrible. I'm either going to take you down like any other villain, or I'm going to save you like any other victim. When I'm done, you won't be a danger to anyone anymore. He smiles. It's really up to you to decide what that means. He feels light when he leaves. Relieved. When he looks back, the bench is empty and Shigaraki Tamura is gone. It's not fear that makes him run the rest of the way to UA. He simply doesn't want to keep anyone waiting. It's not that I'm not honored to be here for your rite of passage or whatever this is, Tsuyu says. I'm very glad to be in the fold. Really, I am. She pauses, considering her next words. But we are sneaking onto a school campus. I have to agree, Ida says weakly. He would probably put up more of a fuss, but he did attack a serial killer without a license once, so his position as a moral authority is a little weakened. I'm not worried, Uraraka chips in helpfully. Ochako-chan, why backslash? I dunno, but Todoroki's my gauge, she says. He and Izuku are like, soulmates or whatever, so if he's fine with Izuku doing this then so am I. The three of them turn to Shouder, who stares back at them blankly. I'm just thinking about how we might get in trouble if we are caught, Tsuyu says. I know it's a Sunday, but some faculty do work on weekends, you know. Don't worry, Izuku assures them all from his position at the head of the pack. If there's one thing I remember about this place, it's that they'll let you get away with anything as long as you might become a hero in the future. There's a bite to his tone that makes little sense to anyone but Shouder. And the ghosts, of course. The ghosts always know what's going on, because there's no keeping secrets from them. Still, Ida says cautiously. Midoriya, I know you said that you talked to your therapist about facing old fears in a new context, but I don't see what that has to do with sneaking onto an elementary school campus. Izuku doesn't respond unless exchanging a meaningful look with Shouder counts as a response. Hint, it doesn't. He once walked these halls surrounded with people but all alone aside from Rei. Now he's surrounded by friends, both living and dead. He even has heroes with him, for all that they are dead. Of course, for what he's about to do, being dead is an advantage for once. Either way, he's not alone. That's sort of the point of this. He still remembers it, even after 9 years. It's halfway between his old classroom and the cafeteria, along the quickest path that he always avoided. The old fear creeps in, because of course it does. But Shadow is letting him squeeze his hand, and Rei is squeezing his other. He's surrounded by friends, and maybe, at this point, he can honestly say that he's faced worse. When they reach it, he stops. He looks at it, then left and right, taking in the hallway and its half-familiar walls. It's been years, and it still matches his memory. Even the sounds coming from behind the door are the same. And yet, they couldn't be more different. He remembers them being impossibly loud, full of vengeance and hatred and old, festering malice. But now, he's heard worse. Far worse. He's even caused worse, to be perfectly honest. I don't get it, Tsuyu says cautiously. It's a janitor's closet, isn't it? There's something special about it, right? Ochako asks. What are we doing here? Izuku looks back to the others. A smile crosses his face when he sees them all still with him. He lets go of Shouder's hand. Exorcising old ghosts, he answers. His hand trembles a little as it approaches the handle. He breathes and it stills. He opens the door,